I'd like to welcome everybody out this evening. It is 6 p.m., our regularly scheduled time for our city council meeting on this Tuesday evening, October 3rd. And again, thank you for coming out to be with us. So we will begin this meeting with an invocation offered by Pastor Lewis Fitting. Grateful for him to be here at the Caldwell Seventh-day Adventist Church. So please come forward, and if everyone would stand for that prayer, and then please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we want to thank you so much for the freedoms that we still enjoy in these United States of America. I want to thank you for the beautiful state of Idaho, and more particularly for the great city of Caldwell this evening. I want to pray for our residents here, Lord, that you continue to grant us safety. I pray that we would continue to have open hearts and minds that would be influenced by your spirit of love, that it might bring a continual sense of unity among us. And Lord, tonight I pray for our city leaders and those that will be making proposals and decisions tonight, that you would give them wisdom and guidance and direction, Lord, as they make decisions on the behalf of the residents of Caldwell. Again, Father, I pray that they would not have necessarily their own agenda and act upon their own way, that, Lord, that would bless them, but Lord, that would again bless the city completely. So again, I thank you for your presence here tonight. Thank you for each one that's here. Bless each home and each family. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you again, Pastor Fitting, for being here. We appreciate that very much. And again, to everybody for joining us this evening. Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Dottie?
Here.
Register? Here. McGee?
Here.
Allgood?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Very good. All council members are present and accounted for. Are there any conflict of interest declarations from any council members regarding an item on the agenda this evening? Okay, and we do not have any special presentation. And I'll just like to note that we did have a workshop this evening before the city council meeting to discuss the recent open house that took place last Thursday regarding downtown parking, proposed metering of the downtown parking spaces. So there was no decisions made. It was just a workshop to present information, to get feedback from the public. And we do not have anybody signed up for audience participation. So that'll move us into the agenda. I believe we do have an amendment to the agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move that we remove item number 13 from the consent calendar as requested by staff. And as well, I move that an addition of item 7A be added to new business.
Very good. So we have a motion for amendment of the agenda as noted. Do we have a second?
Second.
So a motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor Stoddard to amend the agenda as noted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. So with that, do we have a motion for approval of the consent calendar as amended?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Stoddard and a second from Councilor Williams for approval of the consent calendar as amended. And there we go. Okay. So with that, the voting is open. Perhaps.
Not getting any action.
Oh, there we go. Now we're starting to. Okay, so all votes are cast, voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously, and that does approve our consent calendar as amended. That moves us into old business. Our first action item is a public hearing to consider acceptance of the fees over 5% of that previously charged for the Caldwell Executive Airport, the Finance Department, and the Water Department. Rochelle, there you are. The time is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy to be here tonight and present these fees. Raylyn, the Finance Director, did prepare this, and I am here tonight in her replacement. The fees for airport, there's a new fee that has been proposed, a fuel flowage fee at 4 cents per gallon. This is not something that was a fee that was previous year, so it will be effective in fiscal year 24. We have a correction on the other two, rates, the land lease and the ramp bulk rate, were previously being rounded to the third decimal. And so this rate just rounds it to the nearest penny to be in accordance and match more so what we're actually billing in our system, because we can't really split a penny in that regard. So those are just corrective entries. I will note that on the land lease, the 6.25% is incorrect. The calculation on the spreadsheet, the percentage for that is actually less than 5%, but because this spreadsheet did not take into account the original rate of 0.325, it jumped that rate increase to over 5%. The actual increase, if recalculated appropriately, would be an increase of 4.62%. The second department is the finance department. There's a return check fee of $15. That is a new fee that's proposed to help cover costs of administrative duties in relation to checks that are returned. And then the last fee for the water department, that was an increase. That was an increase from the previous fee that was needed. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Very good. Any questions from council? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. I don't know, Mr. Swanson, do you want to comment on any of those before we go to testimony on it, the airport fees, or?
I have no comment.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we do have a few people signed up in regards to this item in opposition. So we'll start at the top and work our way down. So Mr. Neary, so if you please come forward, and you will have 3 minutes for your testimony, and then you can stand for questions.
Like always. Randy Neary, 507 Dishman Place, Caldwell, Idaho. I am also an airport maybe commission member, not sure quite where we stand with that. Further discussion, hopefully. Not knowing about what the new fees were, but I am opposed to any lease rate increase out at the airport, and this is why. Less than a year ago, this commission tasked the airport commission to come back with, sorry, I got to get my thoughts. They're written right here, but anyway, tasked us to come up with new revenue because the airport operates in the black. In part of all that, rate increases were going up. On one of my particular hangars, I got an increase of 94%. Went from 22 or 0.227, so 22 and a third or 7 cents, to 42 cents. Now we're wanting to raise it to 44 or 45 cents. I haven't even been billed the 42 cents yet because of the way it fell. If this gets approved, that will be 100+% rate increase on my hangar. Again, we're going to talk about relationship and stuff. I know it's a city-owned airport, but without hangar owners, there's less value out there. I decided to build a hangar. I entered into an agreement with the city with a 22.5 cents lease rate, knowing that rate increases could happen, but not double, literally doubled, 100% rate increase. So I'm opposed to this, and part of that, and I opposed it back then, it still passed. I still will pay it, and I will still stay. But part of my concern is part of what was sold to us was by this council and the past public works director was, we're going for such a large rate increase so we don't nickel and dime you to death year over year. But here we are, less than a year, we're asking for more money. And again, I haven't even paid that rate increase yet because my lease actually is up in November on that particular property. Now, in doing this, I did some investigating today, and I called this Kenny County Assessors. And again, this goes to the partnership that I feel we have as hangar owners and with the city as the owners of the land and the airport. In 2022, there was an assessed value at that airport on 277 taxable parcels of $45 million. In 2023, there's 280 taxable parcels to a value of $69 million. Now, that's $69 million of assessed value worth of hangars out there. That has nothing to do with the land. That's us hangar owners. Where is that accounted for when it comes into this airport runs in the black or the red? I'm not saying that all that property taxes should go back to the airport. That's way above me. That's smarter people that run cities. But I think it should be accounted for. It should be a number that's addressed somewhere. Whether that generates $1 million, $100,000, $200,000 in property tax revenue. So when the cities, or when we're told that this airport runs in the red, where does that money come in? I entered into an agreement. You heard this before. I built a hangar. I pay a lot of property taxes on that particular hangar and some of the others that I own. I felt I've done my part. I backed the city. I chose to spend my money in this city, put it on this airport. I'm all in. But now this council has raised my rate. Now they're presented to them as a rate increase that will be 100% to me. Where's that partnership? Where's that sense of community and relationship when I've already done it? What do I have my option to do? Sell my hangar and move on, but I've already made my investment. I've showed my cards, and now the city's coming back and saying, well, now that we know what your cards are, we're going to take advantage of that. Where do I sit in this? The $20 a month that this is going to refer, or $20 a year is pittance. I don't care about that. It's the principle of it. 100% rate increase is what this will be for me in the less than 12 months. That's where I have whatever. I have a problem with this, trying to use a fancy word. Anyway, so part of also what this council did to the commission was to bring forth other revenue ideas, one of which was fuel flow, which we presented that at the time. It was decided not to, so I'm for that part. We were for that part when we presented it a few months ago, 6 months ago or whatever. But the other thing we were tasked with we brought forth was RFPs. If the north side of this airport would get developed, which we have approved RFPs, we're waiting for developmental agreements. I predict that's roughly a $30 to $40 million investment on that side, which will be more property tax, assessed value and hangars over a 5 to 7 year build out. That has to be again calculated, but it's not moving forward. So the question is why. Anyway, stand for questions.
Thank you so much.
I didn't talk fast enough.
I actually gave you an extra 2 minutes, too.
Thank
We'll
you.
give 5 minutes to everybody on this to provide a little extra time, so I appreciate that. Questions from council? Okay,
No
thank you so
questions.
much. Appreciate you, Randy. Okay, next we do have Stan Seward. So if you please come forward, if you can state your name and address, and then we'll give you 5 minutes.
Not to use it today. Stan Seward, Caldwell resident and a pilot and hangar owner out at the Caldwell Airport. I got to be an observer. I'm not a commissioner, but I was in the budget meetings that the Airport Commission had last year, and I watched them work very hard and brainstorm, and I think they did a wonderful job coming up with new ideas. And I am disappointed that they didn't have an opportunity to do that this year, and that's the biggest reason I signed up as against this, is I didn't see the Airport Commission involved this year in the budget planning. And I know there was a lot of moving parts this year, but we do have a lot of talent on the Airport Commission, and it makes sense to use them. One budget thing that keeps coming up, and it really just needs dealt with and put to bed, and I communicated with Scott a little bit on this today, but there's a period of leases, and this impacts the budget. It's roughly 2010 to 2019. It's where council rate was introduced, so you guys decide, but you aren't God on those leases, okay? There's a CPI clause, okay? So there's 10 years where there's a CPI clause, and then sometime in 2019, and we need to figure out exactly when, but sometime that CPI went away. Now, roughly 2 years ago, Steve Murray went back and forth with staff, and basically staff backed off and said, yes, you're right. We can't raise your rate 30%. I mean, he had to really fight and
and get to the point where he was getting an attorney involved, okay? But staff backed off, his lease went back down, okay? And it worked out for him. The problem is there's a whole slew of leases that are in this situation. And we got Brent to kind of concede that, oh, we'll look at it when leases come up for billing. Well, it's been very hit and miss. People are still having to fight to get the CPI respected, okay? So that it's a budget item. Honestly, I mean, I think most of us in this room, our folks taught us that if you make a mistake, you apologize and you fix it, you know, and that's really what I expect from the city. You know, it was an honest mistake, but it was pointed out 2 years ago, and it should be fixed on that 10-year period of leases. The last item that I wanted to hit on was is just where we bring our money in from, and you know, storing airplanes is just one function of an airport. There's fuel sales. I'm actually pleased to see that a little tariff go onto the fuel. But the airport is really somewhere where you land and you take off. And right now there's absolutely no cost associated with that major activity that happens at the airport. So we can have a 172 aircraft that might have 50 operations in a day. And it's a training aircraft, so it lands and takes off. That would be 2 operations right there. But you could have 50 in a day, and then somebody that's not training might have 50 in a year. So they get in their airplane, depart, go to the coast, wherever, come back. They might have 50 in a year, okay? Those 2 airplanes take up the same amount of space at the airport, okay? So they're paying the same amount of taxes, the same amount of lease, that kind of thing, but the use is entirely different. You know, one of them is just tying up the pattern, and they're just using the airport to the utmost, and the other is just leaving. So the fuel tax kind of gets at that a little bit, so I'm happy to see that. But I think we have to look at kind of the big picture and how some of the usage that is just constant and intense, you know, how do they contribute to the airport? So, thank you.
Perfect timing. It just 1 second left on it. So hold on. Is there any questions for Mr. Seward? Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here, Stan.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the list is Mr. Marshall, Christopher. So if you could state your name and, oh, you said, did you want to testify?
Yeah, why not?
So you have 5 minutes. For your
Christopher Marshall, 881 West Sandstone Court, Lane, in Boise. I'm against the increases for a couple of reasons. I worry a little bit sometimes that people don't know about airports and aircraft. Seem to think that people who fly there are rich, wealthy people. You take the time to go around there, you'll find a lot of people with aircraft that are probably half the price of a boat that you can put on Lake Lowell. They're not rich and wealthy people. There's only so much blood you can get out of a stone. You can keep squeezing and squeezing, and in the end, the pips are going to squeak. I really worry that both the city and the county are just squeezing and squeezing the people who are there. I had on my hangar a 55% increase in my taxes last year. Along with this, it's just becoming untenable to actually have a hangar, to have a plane here in Caldwell. These are starting to get to rates that are in Southern California sort of levels. And at some point, something's got to give. If Caldwell needs more money for its airport, from its airport, it should look at really investing in the airport. Go to places like Sandpoint, go to places like Coeur d'Alene, and see what they're doing. They generate so much more revenue as an airport for the local community than Caldwell. Go to other places and investigate what's going on there. Have they got hotels? Have they got manufacturing going on there? There's a lot of different things that Caldwell could do to really energize Caldwell Airport rather than just squeeze people who are there. And that's really all I have to say. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Marshall? Okay, thank you. It's good to see you. Okay, next on the list is Gene Credibring. If you please come forward, state your name and address, and then you'll have 5 minutes as well.
Okay, my name is Jean Cragbring. I live at 15855 Orchard Avenue, and I'm not on the commission. We do own a hangar, and all the people that spoke before me said it perfectly. I disagree with the rate increases. I think you're squeezing the wrong people. There needs to be more at the airport to bring more people in. And I'm concerned that last year there was a commission and they asked them about suggestions and rate increases, and they gave a different recommendation than what was presented to the city council. So right now, Caldwell has the highest tie-down rate, and it shouldn't. I mean, we're not that great of an airport, and there's nothing here. There's no cafe or anything like that. You need to, like they've said, we need to look at how can we bring people to Caldwell. So I think squeezing the people that own hangars is not the way to do it right now. So I am opposed to the fee increases. And like I said, you didn't talk to the commission. And on your site, it says that citizen involvement is an essential ingredient for strong local government. And you've ignored the commission and getting their opinion on this. So, but I back everything that everyone else said too.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Because there seems to be a consensus of agreeing with the fuel flowage fee. Do you or do you not agree with that one as well? Or
I'm okay with that, but I think you're squeezing too much out of the citizens with some of the rate increases that you have had and the issues with the leases and how high the tie downs are. You keep raising stuff. You're going to make it so no one can afford to come to Caldwell.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we did have one other sign up. I indicated to not testify, Vivian Perkin. Just want to make sure you didn't want to speak. Okay, very good. Okay, so that is all that is signed up to testify on this matter. So I don't know if there's really any questions that come up. I don't think we need to have rebuttal from staff, but if there's any questions that did come up from the testimony was given, you have staff available to answer those questions. So, Councilor Williams, you're looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I appreciate the comments that were made today, and I want to agree that while the fuel flowage fee is welcomed by most, even though there is a squeeze there, the lease rate increase seems to be poor faith. When we made a mistake and we're going to adjust it because of that mistake, and it's a perfectly logical explanation, I get it, and our new finance department, not completely new, thankfully, but our finance department is working so hard to improve things, but this is our mistake, and it seems in poor faith on our part to turn around and increase lease rates again on these hangar owners. And while there's still some confusion about property taxes and how much we get out of that, and I know we don't actually set how much we get to take from the property taxes paid, even if they're at the airport, but the airport is generating revenues for the city that the city benefits from that are largely unknown and unspoken of. So I would recommend that we remove that 2-cent increase to the leases and apologize to staff that we have to keep having that fraction to deal with there. But I think for the sake of our commitment, when you say yes, yes is yes, a friend told me once, and so I think our yes should be yes from what it was, now not under a year later, increasing those lease rates again.
Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councilor Register.
So I had a list of questions, but actually I'm just going to go with, I agree with everything that Councilor Williams just said. I also agree that I feel like we just did this increase and that we had sent everybody back to come to the table with whatever, you know, the agreement was going to be, and they did that. And I feel like, kind of like you, I kind of feel like, again, it's another kind of just slap in the face to come back and say, well, let's just raise it again. So I'm on board with keeping the fuel fee and taking this part out of it and revisiting that at a more appropriate time. And I agree that we need to be bringing stuff to the airport. The only thing I want to say about the whole idea of squeezing the pilots and whatever is, if it becomes necessary to fund the airport, there will come a time, or could come a time, where that fee has to come from there instead of us putting it on the taxpayers. So just to sort of keep that in mind. But do I think right now is the time? No, I don't.
Thank you. Any other, Councilor McGee?
Probably a question from Mr. Hilty, and I think I know the answer, but I just probably want to hear from him. There's, on these fee increases, proposed fee increases, there's nothing to preclude us from removing one of the fee increases. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And your mic worked good that time. So you got it down. Way to go. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Stoddard?
Mr. Mayor, I just curious, Mr. Seward talked about the consumer price increase, and Mr. Nearing said his increase was over 100%. So how does that fit in with our obligation with the leases that we have? I mean, that doesn't match at all. Consumer price index wasn't up 100%, was it this year? Mr. Nearing, you want to comment? Can you comment on that?
So we did not close, I forgot to close the public testimony portion. Seeing as there was only the 4 that signed up, I think that's totally fine. So yeah, do you mind coming forward, Randy? Maybe it's good that I forgot to do that, so you could go forward.
So what it was is it was your council rate. So to further elaborate, if you remember, past Public Works Director said it only affected 9 hangar owners. Those are street access, and I'm only talking street access commercial rate. I don't know how that affects. The 32 cents is the inside the fence. The 42 cents was the non-legacy, so I believe 2018 and newer leases, street access commercial rate. So the council had the option to do a large increase to fall under that council rate, and then you opted to do that. So that further discussed, that's why it was such a large rate increase.
That was last year, though.
Last year,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
And again, it hasn't even been long enough yet that it's hit everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
And that was one of those, if I remember, it used to be all the same, regardless if you had street frontage or not. So they separated it and made a bigger increase if you had that street frontage compared to interior.
Correct. And again, as a hangar owner that has street access, I was for a rate increase. I fully said we should have it, something on the total line alongside of Napa. It was just such a large rate increase, and here we are again.
Okay. Excellent. Very good. Maybe I should stand for a motion to close public testimony of this hearing, unless we have one in front of us. Okay, so we have, that's right. We have a motion from Councilor, was that Allgood? Do we have a second from Councilor McGee to close the public testimony portion of this hearing? All those in favor say aye.
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 Yeah, that motion passes. Like I said, it worked out perfect, so appreciate that, Randy. Okay, any other discussion, any other questions for staff? Okay. And then any motions, and it was noted that it is more than appropriate if you can still approve this and remove one or any portion of the proposal, if I'm not mistaken on that. Is that correct, Mr. Hilty? Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Williams.
I move that we approve the resolution adopting the schedule of fees for service as presented, with one exception, that the lease rate increase be removed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor Allgood to approve the resolution with the exception of the land lease rate proposed increases. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, then with that, the voting is open. And all votes are cast, and voting is closed, and that motion does pass unanimously. So that does approve the resolution with those, with that change. And that would move us, I believe, into action, because that would have been action item number 2. And so that moves us in action item number 3. Consider resolution adjusting the Ball Ventures Alquist traffic mitigation fees for the North Ranch Development Project. Mr. Hilty, time is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I saw Ton walk in. Okay. I'm going to turn this over relatively quickly to Tom Peterson, who is General Counsel for BVA and can address this request. There's really 2 parts to the request, and I'm going to kind of outline what those are as best I can, and he can correct me where I get it wrong. One is fairly routine, frankly, that would have happened in the engineering department without council action. It routinely does. The second one is a little bit different. It has to do with traffic mitigation calculated for the North Ranch development, which is a BVA project north of Highway 2026. I think most of you are familiar with it. Over 100 acres of commercial industrial development. Like every other development that triggers the threshold for traffic mitigation, there was a traffic mitigation amount calculated for BVA. That was $990,000. As developers go through development, there are what I will refer to as fairly routine adjustments to that figure that they can prove up and earn. One of them has to do with truing up the estimated trip generation. So in a larger development where you've got different zones in this case and different potential users, when you start the process, you make estimates about what traffic generation is going to be. Once actual uses are constructed on site, those may change. They may go up, they may go down. And when they go down, so when the actual trip generation is less than what was estimated, there is an adjustment for that, and they're asking for that to be reduced. That amount is $89,250. There is also adjustments available when developers dedicate right-of-way for uses beyond what was originally anticipated. And when they construct road improvements, right? And these are issues they work with the engineering department on. That also has occurred, and there is some additional work that may occur. And so there's a couple of additional numbers there. The additional right-of-way value, $210,510, and then a couple of additional pocket lanes to be constructed. If they are, in the way the resolution reads, if they are constructed, there would be an actual reduction for whatever the cost of that is. The estimated cost is $280,000. So that really, I think, that Mr. McDonald would tell you is routine. We calculate those numbers and we reduce that as traffic mitigation, because when those things occur, there is actually mitigation to traffic that was anticipated. You have a resolution and you'll note there's 2 different resolutions. Option 1 resolution is limited to those things which staff would consider to be straightforward and routine. The other issue that arose here has to do with an incentive. This project was incentivized by the Urban Renewal Agency, and there was a number of dollars that was set aside for infrastructure improvements within North Ranch. What happened, and I have verified the facts, I don't know that I'm aware and can answer all the questions about where the decisions were made and why it happened, but dollars were used to improve traffic at Muller Lane, and the agency, the Urban Renewal Agency, paid for those improvements. As a result of that payment, out of funds that had been set aside to incentivize North Ranch, they ran out of funds for some of the infrastructure improvements that were going to be paid for, most specifically the irrigation system internal to North Ranch. And so when that incentive was used on Muller Lane traffic improvements, BVA then had to pay for those irrigation improvements that they believed, and I think in fairness, the agency intended to pay for. So they had to pay $381,000 for those irrigation improvements. They were also then unable to construct the improvements on Muller Lane, which would have been, I think, it certainly would have qualified as another credit under their traffic mitigation. So we have a twist here at the end, and when it came up, staff said, we're not comfortable handling that internally. This is a decision that the city council is going to have to make regarding what it wants to see done with this traffic mitigation amount. The upshot of this was really that the incentive intended and proposed by the Urban Renewal Agency was not maximized, and the offset was that $381,000 for the irrigation improvements. So I'm going to let Ton correct any of that or flesh it out and answer your questions. But for my purposes, there's a decision to make. Option number one would be approving a reduction to traffic mitigation on things that staff really considers to be generally routine for all developers and sufficiently established by the developer, consistent with our normal process. Option number two, or the second resolution that you have in your packet, which begins on page 186, offers a further reduction as a result of this. Well, I don't know if it was a miscommunication or a dust up or an issue, whatever happened that resulted in BVA not getting the full benefit of the incentive from the agency that was intended. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Peterson. But before that, I'd certainly try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. Any questions, Kurt, right now for Mr. Hilty? Okay, thank you so much. So the handoff taking place, please come forward, and if you could just state your name and address for the record, then the time is yours.
Yes, sir. Tom Peterson, address is 1144 South Silverstone Way, Suite 500 in Meridian, Idaho, 83642. And I am the Chief Development Officer and General Counsel for BVA. I want to thank Mr. Hilty. Nothing to correct there, just perhaps add additional flavor too, if that's helpful to you. And I do thank you for the time and including us on a hearing. It's a very busy night. Mr. Hilty is exemplary in the state bar for his professionalism, and really appreciate dealing with him, with Mr. McDonald, with everyone in the city of Caldwell. As we look at this North Ranch project, it truly has been a great partnership, and we are so appreciative of the opportunity to continue in that spirit of partnership here tonight. Very briefly, and I'm not going to just simply rehash, but just and I'll be very brief, add a few pieces of additional flavor. When Ball Ventures Alquist, when we came before City Council, and this was back in 2020, as Mr. Hilty alluded to, there was an agreement, a development agreement that was executed it was to annex and rezone the 15 acres that's commonly known as North Ranch Business Park. Since that time, I think it's worth noting, not quite 3 years has passed by, but since that time, with the help of wonderful partners in the community, over 660,000 square feet of mixed-use development has been completed at the North Ranch Business Park. It is, except for one parcel that we're actually taking through for plat now, it's completed. And anyone that has been to that area, you'll know that includes industrial, commercial, retail, D&B supplies flagship stores located there, a VA hospital, an ICCU branch, and other uses. Subsequent to November 4th, 2020, in 2021, and this is set forth in the letter that I believe you've been provided, the City of Caldwell and BVA executed a traffic mitigation agreement, and as set forth by Mr. Hilty, that per code set forth the maximum amount of $990,000, approximately $990,000 as the maximum amount that BVA would be required to pay. Importantly, in paragraph 6 and 7 in that agreement, it says that as the developer, in lieu of paying the $990,000, we can construct improvements to be selected by the city. So that means that we can't just go out and start making improvements, but we sit down in collaborative fashion, as we did with Mr. McDonald, with the other staff members, and collaborate and decide on those said improvements to be selected by the city that can be constructed within the project influence area to satisfy the traffic mitigation amount. So in other words, we can pay the money, or we can do said improvements that acts as a credit against that amount. Then importantly, in paragraph 7, it continues in the traffic mitigation agreement that the foregoing reductions, meaning said improvements to be selected by the city in lieu of the payment,
may reduce the final amount of the payment, and in addition, at the city's sole discretion, the totality of the mitigating improvements constructed as of the date of the final payment are sufficient to mitigate, in fact, the new traffic caused by the development of the property. I mentioned that because I think it's important to note, and this is very, I think, germane and critical to my presentation to you tonight, is that BVA is not asking that any amounts owed under the traffic mitigation agreement be reduced or waived in any way or forgiven in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, just the opposite is true. In 3 parts I'll briefly walk through and then I'll be done. The requested modification is made pursuant to paragraph 8 of the traffic mitigation agreement that states, based on the allowances Mr. Hilty mentioned that are very routine on developments, and in addition to the construction performed for improvements on site, that the modification state and certify that BVA's obligation is fulfilled because of the work performed in lieu of payment. And I think that's an important point that I want to emphasize. So the three pieces, and I can be brief here. There's a reduction to reflect the actual trip count. So starting with the $990,000 amount, that was based off of estimated trip counts. And the agreement sets forth that when actual trip counts come in, that we can go back to the original traffic engineer, which we have done. They can recalculate the actual trips versus the estimated trips, and any delta we would get credit for. That's set forth in the letter and reflective of $89,250 of the actual trip counts that are generated. So that amount would be pursuant to policy and code, a deduction from the overall traffic mitigation amount of $990,000. Then, as Mr. Hilty indicated, there's additional right-of-way that was dedicated, and this is above and beyond what would normally be provided for in the development. In fact, in this case, it was specifically dedicated for the completion of a roundabout that was required for the school project immediately adjacent to our project, and then also separately a southbound right turn lane onto Smead Parkway that the city of Caldwell had required and separate from the North Ranch Business Park. So that additional granting of right-of-way is then serves as a credit, again, lowering the $990,000 of traffic mitigation. And that is, I agree with Mr. Hilty, that is standard. What I would note here, and this is important, because we always want to be a good partner to the city and we want to be above board. That amount that's an estimate of $210,000, that's based on a dedication amounted to approximately 23,390 square feet of additional right-of-way. But I have estimated that at an assumed value of $9 a square foot. I think that's an estimate, and it would be my proposal that to really finalize that number, that perhaps an appraisal be done or something so that we're actually coming up with a value, not just an estimate. I think that's both fair and equitable to both the city and the BVA. Finally, as was indicated, as is reflected in the hearing examiner's report, and this public hearing was held on August 18th, 2020, and I think this is what Mr. Hilty was alluding to. In the hearing examiner's report, it states, and I'm looking at paragraph 2.6 on page 2 of 19, and it states that in the development agreement of the Urban Renewal Agency, and then it lists the instrument as 2020-031452, the agency agrees to design and install at its own expense public roads, utilities, and irrigation facilities for the project. As we sat down with city staff to identify that universe of projects that would be eligible for traffic mitigation satisfaction, we did not include the PI, the pressurized irrigation, because that is something that the agency agreed to design and install at its expense. And so as set forth in Exhibit C to the letter that I had provided to each of you, what we did do is identify several projects that BVA could complete in lieu of paying the traffic mitigation amount that would satisfy and provide a credit against that amount. And those included 4 different things: aviation improvements, and that would be to construct the 12-foot lane from Highway 2026 to Moeller. The Moeller improvements, and that was to construct an additional 12-foot lane from Aviation to our site. There were signal improvements at Moeller. That would be a traffic signal or single lane with right turn bypass. And then some restriping and signal reprogramming at Aviation. So if, in my recollection, and I've had to go back and refresh my memory, but to the extent I can remember, there were 2 in-person meetings and then some various phone calls. That was also at that weird time that we all refer to as COVID. So there were some video calls as well. But in those in-person meetings, it had been stated to us, as I had mentioned previously, these are the projects BVA can complete at its own expense to serve as a credit. Now, ultimately, those projects were completed by by the agency. Each of those that I just listed, the Aviation improvements, the Moeller improvements, the signal improvements, and the restriping and signal programming, those were completed by the agency, and they were not available for us to complete. The estimated cost for completing those roadway improvements totals approximately $435,000. And again, to be fair, those are estimated numbers, and actual costs can and should be verified by the City of Caldwell, as those were completed per City of Caldwell contracts. But I think this is the salient point, and all that's background to this point. As we had a mitigation amount to fulfill, those projects that we were eligible to fulfill had been completed. And because the agency had completed those projects, there was no more money left for the construction and installation of pressurized irrigation. We needed pressurized irrigation, and we want to be a good partner in this fantastic environment that has been created through the North Ranch Business Park. So we put in the pressurized irrigation. That was a cost that we then incurred at approximately $381,000. So in other words, again, we're not asking that there be an amount forgiven or reduced or sidestepped or waived, but rather there was an amount for the approved projects that BVA could perform, and we weren't able to, the city did. And there was an amount of money that was required for the installation of the pressurized irrigation that the city had said it was going to do, but it didn't do, so we paid for that. So what we're asking for now is a recognition of that partnership that we've enjoyed with the city and its staff, that at the end of the day, all of the improvements that were traffic mitigation eligible have been completed. The installation of the pressurized irrigation has been completed. So we've been working in good faith as a partnership, and now at the end of this project are coming for a reconciliation that all projects have been performed and all amounts have been paid, and there needs to be a reconciliation of sorts. Otherwise, as you can imagine, the pressurized irrigation that we put in, and we're not required to put in, we pay that amount of $381,000, but otherwise we'd still be left to pay for the equivalent of the work that was already performed by the city that we would have done otherwise. Finally, thank you for your patience. There's 2, and we are in the process. We're working with ITD, and our chief engineer, Rob Sunderledge, is here for this component too, if there's questions on this. The other piece that we have committed to and are 100% going to do, and we're in the process of that, is the 2 right-hand pocket turn lanes. And that involves some coordination with ITD. And the estimated value of those is, I think they're $140,000 each, more or less. So that would be $280,000. So to summarize, and I'll stand for questions, when you start with the $990,000 and you get credit for, is the wrong term, BVA would get credit for the reduction of approximately $89,000 for the actual trip counts. There would be a credit for the additional granting of right-of-way in the amount of approximately $210,000. There would be an offset, or if you will, a reconciliation of the amount that we paid for the pressurized irrigation because the traffic mitigation eligible projects had been completed, and that's in the amount of $381,570. And then the amount that we will complete for the installation, the construction, the completion to the satisfaction of both the city engineer and ITD for the right-hand turn pocket lanes. Based on the completion of all of that, then we would move for a modification of the traffic mitigation agreement that's incorporated into the development agreement to state and certify that we have completed our traffic mitigation requirements. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you so much. Questions, Councilor McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, that was very thorough, and I appreciate the explanation. But I want to just get back to something very simple, and I think Mr. Hilty stated this. If not for the amount that we're talking about here, which is a little bit larger than we typically do, this would just be in the engineering department. This would just be a decision that was made between the department and the contractor. Am I mistaken? And I do, while I do appreciate all the information that we're getting, to me, this is a typical, I'm looking at Rob while I'm saying this is a typical agreement that we do. They did some work for us, kind of on the fly as they decided that they could do it more efficiently. They worked with our city employees to do so, and now they're asking for a relatively small reimbursement. If in this case it's a larger reimbursement than we typically do, but otherwise this wouldn't even be before the council. Is that accurate?
Almost. The twist here has to do with the fact that they're technically asking for a credit on their traffic mitigation for money spent on pressurized irrigation, which would not normally be done. But there was this twist up, right, where if the agency had paid for the irrigation and BVA had done the traffic mitigation on Muller, right, then it would be very much routine. But that's an unusual circumstance, and I think staff was uncomfortable giving credit for that under these circumstances. But it does seem like everybody's getting what they wanted. Where the city is getting the traffic mitigation that was attributable to North Ranch because the agency improved Muller Lane.
Right.
If the agency hadn't done it, BVA would have done it, the city would have been in the same spot.
And so I think the brass tacks here, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Hilty, are the brass tacks. The city's not out any money here, right? Because of the way that this was handled. And yes, we went in a different direction with what BVA was able to help us with, but in essence, we got exactly what we asked for.
BVA is asking for a credit associated with agency improvements because the agency said that it would incentivize the project, and it did. And the agency got in spades what it wanted out of this.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Williams?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. McGee cleared it up for me. This is work that would have needed to have been done anyway, and now it's been done for us. So if there weren't a reconciliation of this amount, we wouldn't still yet need to do the work anyway. So I think the word you use that is important here is good faith. Rob was aware that they were doing this work. They didn't just take it upon themselves to do this randomly, you stated. And so I think the facts are before us, that the amounts stated, we've received what our benefit was for it, and the city is not out any money. It sounds like everybody's been made whole here.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you didn't actually pose a question, but I want to give an answer if I can to your statement. Councilmember Williams, Mayor Wagner, I think, and this isn't fluff talk. I think the good faith demonstrated by Mr. McDonald and the good faith demonstrated by Mr. Hilty is exemplary in the fact that we are here because it's above board. And I agree with everything that has been said. This probably is something that's in the engineer department because it just got a little bit wonky. Let's go before the city council and make sure that there's visibility to this. And I think we really appreciate, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate being treated with that type of respect and professionalism.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Councilor Stoddard?
Mr. Hilty, I've got a question for you. Mr. Hilty, just the difference between both options looks like one is about 102,000 more than the other. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, did you say 102, Councilor?
Yeah, roughly. I rounded off the number.
Should be 391,000 should be the difference.
Because option one was 580,000, the 300 and the 280.
I don't have them in front of me. My apologies, but you got the resolutions?
Yeah, I'm reading the agenda wrong here, but that's what it said.
So the resolution that would, I guess, provide for this additional credit, the second resolution, has got, and this would be on page, I think, 187 of your packet. It's got the figure 299,760. That is the reduction. It's two things: the reduction in the actual trip counts and the $210,000 estimated for the right-of-way, the additional right-of-way dedicated. That's the 299. There would be a further reduction for the 381,570, which is, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, the exchange between the Muller Lane improvements and the irrigation that was constructed.
Okay.
And then the third, and there's no number on the, that's probably why we're confused. I left the number, the two pocket turn lanes that have been discussed that are yet to be constructed.
Mm-hmm.
There's an estimated reduction there of 280,000, but it's basically what the resolution says is whatever those numbers actually are would be reduced, which is the way we do traffic mitigation reduction for actual construction costs.
Yeah, because the numbers I was looking at was the 299,760 and the 381,570 compared to the 277,760 and the 280.
Right.
So, see what I mean?
I do. I see why that's why you were confused. But there is that the difference between these two would be the full 381.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Allgood.
Yes, sir. This is a little messier than normal. I think that's why we're here. And I want to put some things on the record and clear things up and get an understanding between us if we could. So we're dealing with two separate entities here that have made agreements. We're dealing with the Urban Renewal Agency and the City of Caldwell. And so one of the things that I want to make clear is whether the 381,000 for the irrigation was paid or not was an agreement with the Urban Renewal Agency, correct?
You are correct, and that was in reference to the hearing examiner's report that I referenced earlier at paragraph 2.6. That in that agreement, the agency agreed to install the pressurized irrigation and pay for that with the city. That's correct.
Okay, and when we talk about how much credit that BVA will receive for work that they've done, that's credit the City of Caldwell is discussing, not the Urban Renewal Agency.
Well, and that's a really good, I'm glad you bring that up, because at the end of the day, as it relates to the hearing examiner's report that I've stated in that the development agreement, the Urban Renewal Agency agreement, though it is the agency and the city who are entering into that agreement, the work to be performed, and ultimately the street improvements, and I think this is the connecting point, that the road improvements, in other words, the satisfaction of that then flows through the city and to the developer as we sit down and determine which of the projects are eligible for satisfaction of that amount. So that's where the three parties come together.
So that brings me to my next question. You have talked repeatedly about the cooperative arrangement that we've had here, which is wonderful, but it kind of makes it sound like the city completed the work on Muller Lane without BVA's approval, or like that was something out of the, how did, as everybody understands, the improvements to Muller Lane were BVA's responsibility, but the city came in and did them. Did that fall outside of some agreement? I mean, how did we get to that point? Because it sounds like the city completing Muller Lane saved BVA about $400,000.
Thank you, Councilmember Allgood and Mayor Wagner. Two answers to that two-part question. It it didn't save us the money. It cost, if left as it is right now, it would cost BVA almost $400,000 because there were projects that were identified that we could satisfy our obligation of the $990,000, that we get a credit toward that. But because we spent $381,000 on work that wasn't eligible for traffic mitigation, and in fact was the responsibility of someone other than BVA, then we paid that amount, and then presumably we'd still have to come in and pay the amount. And if that were the case, then we weren't saved $400,000. It cost us $400,000. To answer the first part of your question, I don't know. I don't know what exactly happened, and I think in large part, again, to everyone's credit at the city, that's why we're here, because I don't know exactly why that work was performed. All I know is that there was a universe of traffic mitigation eligible projects that we could then do, and then that work was done, and there was no more money. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I do know that everyone was working in good faith, and I do know that all of the work was completed at the end of the day. Back to the point, the pressurized irrigation was installed and paid for, the traffic improvements were installed and paid for, and we're all in the same place that we had designed to be, except we're just on one side of the ledger and the city's on the other side of the ledger. So we're looking for that reconciliation.
Yeah, and urban renewal is on part of that ledger as well.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilor, all good. I think just one thing to correct in what you said, the city didn't go out and pay for those Muller Lane improvements, the agency did. And I've thought through this a lot, the fact that, I've looked at it from the perspective that, look, if the agency spent money somewhere it shouldn't have and that created a problem for BVA, go resolve it with the agency. It's not a city issue. But I think that Ton points out that the construction of those mitigating traffic improvements means that the adverse impact from BVA's project was actually mitigated. The stuff that needed to be constructed and the money that needed to be spent was spent, and it was done. It was spent, at least on Muller Lane, by the agency. And what should probably have happened here is when the agency began to go do that, they should have hit the brakes and said, no, don't spend your money there. Spend it on the irrigation like you said you would. Then BVA would be able to build that and get this credit on the traffic mitigation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah,
continue?
follow up.
So Mark, and again, I'm not arguing anything. I mean, everybody's doing a good job. I just want to make sure we're accurate when we make these. So the money owed, or the credit owed, the dollars that we're talking about between BVA and the city of Caldwell, right or wrong, that $380,000 is urban renewal money, not city of Caldwell money to negotiate with. Am I correct?
Correct. And here's another way to think about it. What was owed by BVA was not strictly dollars. What was owed was they needed to take care of the adverse impacts of all the traffic that they were going to create so that it didn't fall on the taxpayers of the city. So they owed mitigation. And when we talk about certain things being routine, right, that mitigation is not always done by the payment of money. It's done by the dedication of right-of-way, it's done by the construction of projects and so forth. So I think what Ton is saying, he's asking you to look at it this way, that everything that needed to be done to fully mitigate their traffic was maybe not everything. I don't know how the dollars ultimately come out. There may be some still owed, but the point is the credit for Muller Lane should flow through to them because that mitigated their traffic impact, and that was agreed beforehand. And so the city got that traffic mitigation. Now, it did come from the agency, that is true. The money to do it did. But when the agency spent the money on Muller Lane, it ran out of incentive that should have gone to the project for other things. And so that's what the rub is. So I think their pitch is, we owed you traffic mitigation. You got traffic mitigation in the form of improvements to Muller Lane. The fact that it came from the agency should still be, what was the word, there should be an accounting for that, because the agency agreed to incentivize the project, rightly or wrongly, right? That's what the agency agreed to do.
And one of those projects would have been that irrigation, correct? That's kind of where this is at. So
right,
that's when they came and did it.
So so if I can just beat this horse just a little longer here. So in essence, the agency, if we went with the agreement as is in place here, the agency would pay for Muller Lane and pay for the sprinkler system, or the agency and the city together, if we give them the $380,000 credit.
If I followed that correctly, I think, no, BVA paid for the irrigation, and that is not going to change.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions?
I've got
Councilor
one more
Stoddard?
question. On the pressurized system, it said the cost was approximately $381,570. The actual cost was $422,140. So that's roughly $40,000 difference. Who paid for that then?
BVA, if there's a delta, and this would be fleshed out in the, to be clear, that's a really salient point, because it also goes to the installation of the 2 right-hand pocket turn lanes. We'll get an invoice for that and probably be back here to say, there's a delta that's owed, and we need to pay that, presumably. I don't know what the cost of construction is, or it sounds like this might be delving into the technical reason why I brought Mr. Sunderledge, our engineer, and with your permission, I'd like to invite him to answer that question.
Sure. I just want to determine, does the city pick that up, or did you pay for it? What?
Right. Yeah,
$4,000. It's, a little piece of change.
yeah, thank you. And I'll brief Rob Sunderledge, 1144 South Silverstone Way, Meridian. To answer your question, of the $381,000, the irrigation system did cost more than that. BVA fronted the entire cost, which was in excess of $400,000. What was asked for the mitigation, to keep things simple and round numbers, the $381 was the installation of the conduit, the pipeline work. It neglected there's a portion of the pump station. So there were other components that went in, but it was a complete system that was paid for by BVA in excess of $400,000, but what's being requested in the negotiation is only the $381. So the city didn't pay any excess beyond the difference that you're seeing.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, any motions?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Williams.
I think they're labeled in our packets, and so without further comment or explanation, I'm just going to move that resolution number 2 be approved, which would include the irrigation mitigation factor with BVA. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe the resolution number may be different, but it's the option number 2.
Option number 2,
That's
thank you
shown
for that
in there.
clarification.
And then resolution number to be determined. Okay, so a motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor McGee. And again, in your packet, there's the option number 1 resolution and the option number 2, which states, and the difference is between those is the further reduced for the reimbursement of the irrigation sprinkler expenses. So that is the motion for approval of that resolution. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, then voting, is we just doing a voice vote, or do you have this one, Noah? Okay, so we do have it coming up. So with that, voting is open. And all votes are cast. Voting is closed. And that motion does pass unanimously. So we appreciate the time. I know there was a lot that went into that, a lot of discussion, but we appreciate all the effort on that for both of you for being here this evening. Okay, so that moves us into our next item, which will be, that actually concludes our old business, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, there's one more.
Couldn't approve that.
Oh, so that moves us into number 4. I was looking at number 4. That's why those numbers were off. Okay. So that completes action item number 3. Now we're on to action item number 4. Consider resolution authorizing the reimbursement in the amount of $87,858.09 to BVA for additional public irrigation infrastructure, and approve the agreement with ITD to receive the donation of 972 linear feet of C900 water class pipe. Mr. McDonald.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
This, council and mayor, this is a continuation from the item that was on the agenda 2 weeks ago. I explained that, and I'm happy to explain this again if it is the desire of the council. Just briefly, What I will explain is there are two parcels that are north of the Steve Regan site that are not part of the BVA site. As ITD came in and proposed to run a very large irrigation pipeline along the entire frontage of 2026 just to serve these two sites, we got together and determined that it would be much more efficient and effective to increase the irrigation pump station and some piping sizes on the BVA's site to be able to serve these two parcels, instead of ITD spending somewhere in the ballpark of $600,000 just to get irrigation to these two sites. So what we proposed at the time, what was put together was an idea to allow or ask BVA to increase their pump station size and some mainline sizes to accommodate the irrigation at these two lots. And then that would allow ITD to cancel their pipeline irrigation project. And initially, ITD was planning to reimburse BVA directly for the savings. So BVA would have been reimbursed back the $87,000 for the improvements that they did to their system above and beyond what they needed to do. But because ITD didn't have a mechanism to do that, what they asked was that the city instead would reimburse BVA for that oversizing, which, by the way, is a benefit to the city to have irrigation to these two outparcels, to avoid these outparcels building a whole nother pump station. So the city would reimburse BVA, and then in turn, ITD would reimburse the city through the donation of water class, 16-inch water class pipe. And so at the end of the day, the city is at a net zero. BVA is made whole for the improvements, the additional improvements they made for this irrigation system, and ITD is saving the taxpayers a chunk of money. And so we felt like it was a win-win-win, and that is before you tonight. So this resolution authorizes the reimbursement to BVA for $87,000 and change. In addition, it approves the agreement that we have received from ITD for the donation of the water class pipe that we can turn around and use on some of our water projects that are currently going on. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. McDonald. Any questions from council? Okay, you did an excellent job, it looks like. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and this is a resolution, so I don't believe that we have or need any public testimony, just the information that was provided for Mr. McDonald. So if there's no questions for staff, do we have any discussion or any motions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor McGee.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the resolution as stated.
Very good. And a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor McGee and a second from Councilor Register to approve the resolution. With that, the voting is open. And all votes are cast. The voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously. And that does end that item and moves us into new business. Again, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time this evening, hanging out with us for a little bit. Okay, so we are now into new business, and before we do get started, I know that we do have some students here from Caldwell, I'm guessing Caldwell High School, and their teacher, Olivia, is it Witzel? I don't think I've ever said your last name. So Miss Witzel is their teacher, so appreciate you being here. And how many, do we just have the 2 students? There's 7, so there's some hiding somewhere else. So do you mind the students just maybe stand up and just tell us your name and what grade you're in? Does that work?
My name is Edson Rios. I'm
Very good. Thank you for being here. Good. Thank you, Ryan. Good. Thank you, Amadeo. And we got one that just came back in. Do you mind just tell us your name and what grade you're in? Very good. Excellent. Thank you, Jesus, right? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you again for being here, for your students to come down and hang out with us. We appreciate you staying awake so far. So congratulations on that. But yeah, it's great to have you down here with us today. Okay, so now we are into new business. So this is action item number 1, public protest hearing to consider protest and receive all evidence in favor or against the proposed assessments for the Jefferson Park Subdivision Pump Station, Local Improvement District 22-1. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the very last step of this LID, and I will just give you a very brief summary. And when I say we, I live in this subdivision, and the neighbors found out I worked for the city, and so they accosted me and wanted to make sure that we were doing something with our pump station. Pump station and the irrigation system is private. It is a pressure irrigation system, and we have had a great citizen who is my neighbor maintaining this pump station for 10 years free. And he is now in his 80s and decided he doesn't want to do it anymore. And no one else in the subdivision wants to do it. And so the options are hire a company to maintain the pump station perpetually, or rebuild the pump station so it meets city requirements and city standards and allow the city to take over dedication of that pump station and operate and maintain it. And then instead of paying our annual irrigation assessment to Pioneer, then it's going to CMID, Caldwell Municipal Irrigation District Standards. This process has been going on for a couple years. We started the LID back about 18 months ago. There were 66 property owners that we reached out to find out what the pulse was on this. Out of the 66, we heard back from 45 initially. 44 were in support, and only one had expressed opposition to what was proposed. And so the LID went forward. It was approved. We put our estimates together as best we could, and we got the pump station constructed. And then a month ago, we had the notice to set the public testimony meeting, which is tonight. And we mailed out all the documentation to all of the property owners. And now this is the final protest hearing where any of the property owners are welcome to come up and express any concern they have. And then the council will accept the, just make sure I get the language right. It is the confirmation of the assessment roll, which is in your packet. So with that said, I'm happy to stand for any questions. I will note that the total amount of the project was $98,061.45. And then with the 10% fee that's added for LIDs for administration and other purposes, the total is $100,867. And that has been split. It was originally going to be split among 66 property owners. It has since been determined and verified that 3 of those property owners are not actually connected to the irrigation system. So it is split between 63 property owners. And the total amount that each property owner owes is, sorry, I know I've got that here. It's $1,712. And they can pay that all after today. Tomorrow it's open for 30 days. They can pay that in full, or they can pay that over 10 years in annual payments.
Very good. Excellent. Any questions for Mr. McDonald? Okay. Thank you so much. So nobody signed up. Did you mean to sign up in opposition to testify against this since you are one of the affected property owners?
I am one of the affected property owners, but I did not sign up in opposition.
Okay, very good.
Maybe to organize the LID, that I was opposed to that, but I did it in.
So this means if approved, we get to take back some of that paycheck we give you every couple of weeks. So, okay. Very good. Any questions from council for staff in regards to this item? As mentioned, there is nobody signed up in favor, in opposition, or in support, or neutral, I mean, on that. So with that, if there's any discussion amongst council, or, so I guess that would end actually action item number 1, the public protest hearing, as nobody has signed up for that. And action item number 2 is to consider the bill and ordinance approving this local improvement district. Do we have a sponsor of that bill and a motion to close the public testimony portion of action item number 1?
So moved.
And a second? The motion from Councilor Stoddick, second from Councilor Williams, to close the public testimony portion of that hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. So with that, now do we have a sponsor of bill number 44, ordinance number 3538?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Hogan.
I'll sponsor bill number 44, ordinance number 3538, and move for its passage by title only.
Okay, do we have a second? We have a motion from Councillor Allgood and a second from Councillor McGee for the passage of bill number 44, ordinance number 3538. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, the voting is open. And all votes are cast, so voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously. That moves us into our next action item, number 3, which is bill number 45, ordinance number 3539, amending Caldwell City Code pertaining to security and deposit requirements for special events. Madam Clerk, are you doing this, or is, okay, Mr. Hilty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance that just does a little bit of housekeeping with some Parks and Recs provisions. The ordinance requiring a deposit had been, for some reason, limited to Memorial Park and then other parks kind of on an as-needed basis. And so initially, for special events, when individuals reserve park space for special events, they need to pay a deposit for security and cleaning in case their event causes any problems. And so that's simply the first amendment here extends that to all city parks. And so anytime somebody wants to reserve a city park for a special event, there's going to have to be a deposit paid. I wasn't specifically involved in crafting the ordinance, but I get how this arises. A bad circumstance requires this kind of change, and I'm sure that's what happened. It goes on to speak to security, and I do know we had a special event requested at one of the city properties within the last year that raised serious security concerns. And so there's been some security language added lower down, and I'll summarize that. That basically the request is passed along to CPD, and the police department determines whether and what kind of security might be required, and that could be it could be the police department personnel, could be private security. But those requirements then are calculated and determined by the police department, and then the individual who is sponsoring or promoting the special event would have to provide for that security. That's, I think, the substance of the ordinance. I stand for questions.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Hilty? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So no sign-up sheet for this one. So again, this is bill number 45, ordinance number 3539, amending that section of code as described by our city attorney.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Allgood.
I was wondering if I could ask the police chief just a couple of questions.
Yeah,
about this situation. Sorry to catch you off guard, but I saw you here, thank you. Are you familiar with all this? Have you seen this and you're good with your responsibility for the security on this?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, I didn't, because it does place some burden on the police department to have personnel and review all this and possibly provide personnel security. I just want to make sure that you've seen it and you're good.
Yes, sir, we've been doing this since I took over. This is just solidifying what we've already been doing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions for any staff? Okay, then do we have any sponsor of bill number 45, ordinance number 3539?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Allgood.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll sponsor bill number 45, ordinance number 3539, and move for its passage and approve the summary for publication.
Very good. Very good. So we have a motion from Councilor Allgood and a second from Councilor Williams for sponsorship of bill number 45 in its passage, ordinance number 3539, for its passage by title only and approve the summary for publication. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, the voting is open. Then all votes are cast, so voting is closed, and that motion does pass unanimously. Okay, and that moves us into action item number 5. Number 4. No, don't want to skip this one. So this is to consider bill number 46, ordinance number 3540. This is kind of a two-parter. So repealing and amending the Caldwell City Code, Chapter 2, Article 27, pertaining to the Caldwell Executive Airport Advisory Board, with a request to move for its passage by title only, approve the summary for publication. So this, I said, is kind of two parts. So if you remember, we did have a workshop recently in discussion of amending the current code regarding the Caldwell Airport Commission. There was feedback given. I'm sure Mr. Swanson will go over those changes that were proposed and implemented into the new proposed ordinance. And then the second part on this is also the reset, essentially, of the Caldwell Executive Airport Board of Commissioners, where those terms would be finished as of tomorrow for all members, and then would be reapplying, opening it up for applications to come in to be part of the Caldwell Executive Airport Advisory Board. So essentially those two items, looking at the amendments of the repeal of the existing code and replacing it with this new one being proposed, then also the reset of the current airport commission and looking at new applications starting tomorrow for the advisory board. So with that, Mr. Swanson, the time is yours for your presentation.
All right, Scott Swanson, Director of Aviation, City of Caldwell. Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor. Just want to start out by saying that I don't want anything that happened at previous workshop or coming out tonight to look down on any work that had been done by the current airport commission and what they had dedicated with their time to that, to trying to get the best airport possible that we can within Caldwell. What I do want to discuss is that changes that were brought up as concerns for the ordinance as it was written during the workshop. Most of that has been amended, mainly with consideration on myself. Instead of sitting as a president or chairman of said board, I would be a facilitator of said board. And I also put myself down as the person responsible for minutes with recording the information that is discussed within meetings, and obviously applying a no longer than 5 business days allocation on that for meetings to be sent to all board members, council members, and the city clerk for a agreement on what was discussed before it goes forward for publishment on that. So all of that I would expect to occur within a 10 business day time frame, so that we are getting minutes within a 2-week period of the meeting happening, because that's when it's going to be fresh and on the mind and people are going to remember when that goes. What I do want to discuss is just some of the reasoning behind this ask on the new ordinance for this new advisory board for Caldwell Executive. And just want to start, so I looked at it, just historical research from with the codes, and then when Chapter 2, Article 27 was originally amended to what it is now, the original ordinance was from 1967, at which time the airport existed as the airport itself. From what I've been told and gathered, there was no staff for the airport. So all the city had was a commission to go off of to get information from the airport and its users to council and the mayor at that time. When we come around now, 2023, City of Caldwell has an aviation staff to run and oversee the operations of the airport itself and to relay information from users to council and the mayor with that. So, and then looking at that also, a goal right now, I probably view it as a 5-year goal, to be generous, but essentially to be the best non-commercial airport in the Treasure Valley. And with that, we are going to need, the city will need the best representation of the user base for the staff to make the best decisions to meet the customer needs and wants, balanced with meeting or achieving city objectives and goals on what the city wants from its airport and what it wants the airport to deliver back to the city. What we don't need from this is going to be a body that is in a sense input there to oversee the operations and process and implementation of the staff of the airport, because I feel like that is a job that is already being conducted by the council and the mayor itself. With this, what the city should strive to achieve with this ordinance, and what I'm trying to achieve with this ordinance, is a community, specifically aviation community representation to support the aviation staff in planning operations so the city of Caldwell can utilize revenues to offset costs, and ideally long-term, with those costs being offset, we can flatline the rates with no increases, or at some point with more costs coming in, with more customer satisfaction, we can even lower some rates. The airport in itself should be a sustainable entity within the economic enterprise of Caldwell, not focused on creating a profit, because that would go directly against a Federal Aviation Administration grant assurance at that point. And I look at this as low cost with high service is going to equal excellent customer value. And if the airport can generate excellent customer value, we will bring more users to the airport. We'll be able to facilitate building more services, more shared space on the airport, and really get the best airport in the Treasure Valley. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Questions from council. Councilor Williams, if you could start us off since you are the liaison at the Airport Commission for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, Mr. Swanson, thank you for your work on this. How long you been in the chair now?
I think almost 7 weeks, Councilor.
And you dove into the deep end for sure in a lot of these projects, and I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about you is when you took the position, you realized there were some heavy lifts ahead of you, and we're getting things done and moving things along. If I could take just a moment, Mr. Mayor, by way of commentary, I do believe we have one of the greatest airports in the state of Idaho. My experience thus far has served me well to lend me to believe that not only do we have one of the greatest airports, but we have the most capacity for growth to become even greater. And for all of our sake, let's remember when these RFPs are built out, the revenues that those are going to generate, again, property tax-wise for the city, not directly for the airport because of the way laws restrict how property taxes are distributed, but the impact that this has on our city is substantial and significant. And so our organization and administration of this airport that you have accepted, and I'm grateful that you have, is moving ahead swimmingly. I would appreciate as well that there is a lot of thought gone into this that I'll say again, didn't just begin 7 weeks ago, but that some of this thought began by your predecessor and has been discussions that the council has been having all along over the past couple of years that I've sat on the council, nearly 2 years. So the thing that I appreciate about this is it is our further evolvement in a 360, if you will, look at our airport to support it, to enable it. I believe even your presence is the greatest support of staff our staff could ever have dreamed of. And we do have a good staff out there that is knowledgeable. Rob Oates deserves a lot of credit for his knowledge and his work that he has done. And Lisa has contributed significantly. And now I know we've approved that new position for a maintenance director out there. The staff is growing. All of our staff deserves the kudos and the praise. This is, again, a further achieving of that 360 look that we're taking at the airport that included the new position of Director of Aviation. And so I'm thankful for the work that you've done on this and where we've come to today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments from council at this time? Councilor Register.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I also appreciate all the work that you've done and especially from the presentation that you made the other day and the changes you've made listening to everybody out at the airport, us, the feedback. Everything I've heard has been very positive about how open and willing and flexible you've been about all of it. So that part of it is, I think, I just wanted to put that out there. I did have some questions about you being the reason why you were the recorder instead of one of the board members being the recorder, if you want to elaborate on that. I know it says something about it being a citizen committee, so letting it be a citizen committee as opposed, so if you want to explain that part of it.
Yeah, so I put it down. I do have previous experience with, it wasn't per se called taking minutes at that time, but being the dedicated note taker at whatever point I may have been a lower ranking person in a room of seniors throughout the military. They're like, you're taking notes. So, and they review those immediately. And then you get, scolded per se if they are incorrect because the senior guys have very strong memories and remember what was talked about, which I've already seen with previous minutes coming out, historical months, and have talked to people that have very strong memories on what was discussed. So I look at it this way: if I put myself as responsible for taking minutes, and I give myself a 5 business day window to get those minutes in a very completed rough draft form and sent out to those involved with the meeting, to council itself, and to the city clerk, and say, hey, here is what I would like to publish. Please add any comment from what you feel was either written correctly or incorrectly, and then turn around within another 5 business day window, those would be published as the official minutes.
So is that the only role of the recorder, is to take notes and then publish them?
Yes, to take the minutes and then submit the minutes to staff to get them published.
Okay.
Correct.
And then I wanted to make sure also there was some concern. Will council still be approving board members?
Yes.
Okay, so that was a.
Yeah. So in the
We changed that, right?
yes. So
Okay.
I think I believe it was in there originally. It just the verbiage got changed on it, so it made more sense. But in the first paragraph under membership, it is that essentially myself and the mayor will review applications, the mayor's recommendation to council, and then council will approve the personnel that perform on the board.
Okay, so question for the mayor then. Typically, if we just get a name, will we be able to see the applications or resumes for people that want to sit on the board?
Yes, definitely. So it'd be similar to, I mean, not to the depth of like an appointment of an appointed official, but where we would provide you with the applications that came in, so you can have those for review. I think that makes total sense to have that.
Okay. So I know we still have testimony, right?
So we are. So this is a legislative matter. So there wasn't a sign-in sheet, as probably most people noticed, but I think it is important we do get some feedback from the airport users that are here, so we will have that.
So I don't know if I want to reserve these comments for after testimony or not, but just for you to know, like I am not going to support dismantling the Airport Commission Board.
Okay.
So I have a list of reasons why. I don't know if I should state them now or wait.
Up to you if you want to do it now or later.
So part of the reason why I'm not going to support that is I believe that we have a commissioner board who's put a lot of time and energy and effort into this. And one of the questions that I have for you is, do you have an influx of people that are coming to you and saying they want to be on this board? Because if not, I'm not understanding why we're alienating the people who have given all this time and energy and effort and expertise to the city as a volunteer if we're just asking them to basically start over and apply again.
So I think my view on this, I very much understand the concern looking at the situation from that context. It absolutely makes sense on both sides. How I look at it with just a completely new establishment, I'm not discrediting any work that was previously done, and I fully support any current commission member that wants to be involved with the advisory board to apply. I just look at it to get the best personnel and the best representation from the airport. We go through the process that's on the city website for commissions and boards with the application process, you know, the paperwork you fill out, the resume, why I should be on this commission or board. And then all that needs to get thoroughly reviewed. I have discussed with some of the users of the airfield already things I would like to do. Obviously, the current commission would expire starting tomorrow. However, I also feel that they are still a user base of the airport. And from my position, I can reach out and figure out what they need as, you know, characteristics and attributes of personnel that are best going to support the airport and the user base that's at the airport. Almost doing a personal analysis on like what to expect. And I encourage the users to put people forward to apply for the position.
How many people are on the board right now?
Right now it's 5.
Okay, so you have 5 people on the board, but now we're increasing it to 9.
Yes.
Right? So you can then go through and you can choose 4 more people with everything that you just said for recommendation for the board to maybe even it out, have different perspectives, whatever it is. So the idea of wiping out the board who's given us so much time and energy, like I said, and then replacing them with either 9 new people or the same 5 and 4 more seems like a lot of time waste and kind of in I don't know exactly what the word is. I feel like it's kind of rude in some ways. So and we can disagree on that. But I think that what my understanding of this whole thing has been is that the board has been very honest that there were some issues with previous management and the way things were going. And in my opinion, as you coming in as the new aviation director with everything that you've brought, which is fantastic, and all these good things, that you should then be able to go in and work with the board in place and then add your 4 people and work with that and see how they do. And then if there are still problems or anything like that, then you can, I don't know if you have a provision in there to remove a board member if there's some kind of problem, or if it can be removed from council or whatever it is. But I feel like it's wrong to go in and wipe out a board and start over, especially when we're adding more positions. That's just my opinion. I also feel, I guess my other question is, the current board as it is, when do their terms expire before this, like before this tomorrow thing? I mean, when would they have expired?
It's starting tomorrow, I would assume at midnight, so on the verbiage on
So
there.
without that, like if none of this, thank you.
Oh, without that.
No, she actually has it here. So we have 2024, 25, and then 2 in 2026. And so we were talking about staggering them before. So if the board was reset and you had 9 new members, how would they be staggered?
I think that's something I need to figure out and how that's gonna work.
Okay. So it's gonna be my recommendation that we keep the board in place and that you add the additional members.
Okay.
And work with that in that way, and that we should not be alienating people who have given us all this time. I think what the other concern is too, and this goes more to give to my fellow council members, is that if we start bringing in new appointed officials who are overseeing a board and we start wiping out boards, I think we're gonna have a lot of trouble getting people coming in to volunteer for boards that they don't know that they're gonna actually sit on, or that they're gonna have that opportunity if we bring in somebody and they decide, nope, we don't wanna do that anymore. So I think we need to stay consistent. Let's see. I think that kind of covers everything that I had a note on, other than that earlier when we were talking about the lease agreements, that Councilor Williams had said something where it was poor faith on dealing with the increase, and I believe that it's the same thing in poor faith and dismantling the commission, especially if we're adding more members. So that's just my position as people talk.
Yes.
And I'd love to see, I have total faith in you that you can bring together 4 more people into the group that's already established and do really great, amazing things with them, instead of resetting and then trying to figure out how to stagger people and doing all this kind of stuff, and in kind of in some way negating all the things they have given to us. I think we promised them as a council, as a city, that they would have a term that they would fulfill, and I feel like we should honor that. And I mean, not that it's exactly the same, but I'll use Councilor Doty as the example, where he has to retire for obvious reasons. And he reminded us at the last meeting that during the appointment that he was elected, and that was something that was important for the council to remember, that the people elected him. So when we go to do an appointment again, we should probably be honoring the will of the people during that election. And so I just think we should honor the promise that we made to these board members when we put them on.
Okay, very good.
Mayor, may I?
Yeah.
I just want to say, again, I fully support the work you've done on this, but perhaps for the sake of saving time, I would agree with Councilor Register, if that is the only sticky wicket here, that we could work around that, and I would follow your lead on that. I do want to know, did Brad pay you to say that?
No, but I take really good notes, and I remembered that he was elected, so.
Very good. Any questions for Scott at this time from any of the council members?
Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
Councilor Stoddard.
Scott, I just want to reiterate too what Councilor Register said. I think we ought to keep these at least 4 people on there, because their terms don't end from 24, 25, and 26. I think it's prudent for continuity between them and the other members that you're going to hire, and they'll have offset years too, right? I mean, they won't expire in the same year, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I don't know if that's a big change item that you don't like, but you know, the reason we hired you is because there were some major management problems at the airport, and that's why you're here. And, you know, you and I have had several conversations, and like Councilor Register, I appreciate all you've done already. Like I say, you've taken a deep dive in this thing, and we still need to keep in mind that these folks that are on the commission and the hangar owners, you know, they're still our customers.
Yes.
And we have to keep that in mind. They are taxpayers, and we have to keep that in mind. So, anyway, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Any other questions for Mr. Swanson at this time? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. As mentioned, there's not a sign-in sheet as this is a legislative matter, but we do know there's especially some board members that are here, and some other airport users. So maybe we begin with our board members if they do wish. I see Randy and Vivian. So I don't know if either of you want to take a few minutes to say anything, or Randy's, as I say, Randy's never one to turn down the opportunity. So
Randy Neary, 5 vote. Do I have to give all that again?
You're good.
Okay, thank you. As a commission member, I am pretty neutral in this. I could be swayed either way. I do agree with Councilman Register and Stoddard that keeping the board for continuity does make sense, as well as staggered terms. But I can't oppose everything in front of you guys, so this one I'm going to stay kind of neutral on. I would reapply, but I do know that one of the other commissioners has told me, council or board members, that he feels it as an insult and he would not reapply. And I do think he brings value to the board. So I would hate to lose that one individual to speak. And I'm sure you all have heard from him as well. So anyway, saying that, I'm pretty neutral in it, but that's where I stand.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Do you have a question?
No, thank you, Mr. Neary. And I spoke with that commissioner today, and we had a similar conversation.
Okay. Very good. Vivian, did you want to say anything, or?
Vivian Firkin, 19335 Lower Pleasant Ridge Road, Caldwell. I just want to say that these 2 years that I have been on the commission have been a huge learning curve for me, and also an awesome opportunity for me to understand what has been going on with the airport. I really feel that the commission has been, I feel like we've kind of been made the scapegoats for things that the city council wasn't able to. I felt that the city council was lost as far as the airport for this last year and a half. And I feel like now with this coming on and this opportunity to have a whole new reset, it is kind of a kick that, a slap in the face that we didn't do a good job, that we weren't efficient, that we didn't move in any kind of a positive direction. However, as a commissioner, I feel like there was a stifling from the staff and from the commission, or from the council. We looked to you for direction. You let us down, in my opinion. We asked for you to help us become a good commission. You kind of were lost, so you weren't able to help us at that time. And now there's going to be a reset, and we're not going to be that, I appreciate what you're saying about what you have said about us. We did our best with what we had. And I just feel like, whichever way it goes that way. I hope for the best. I hope that we do move forward. And I hope that we all understand that we have a wonderful asset that needs to be taken care of, and that the right people in place should be able to do that. So that's basically what I have to say.
Thank you, Vivian. Appreciate that very much. Stan, did you want to say anything, or?
Yeah, I do want to thank Vivian. I have seen her work very hard over the last couple of years. And I've also seen Scott work very hard over this past 7 weeks. And I've enjoyed a great deal talking to him and looking at these different things. And I do have I guess on this particular, proposal, I think it's about 95% there. I think there's some fine tuning things. I think there was some discussion about a youth member and what they would consist of. Would they be voting, non-voting? I'm not quite sure this covers that. And I think the language is kind of off. It says greater than 18 and under 21. So that gives you a 19 to 20-year-old, which is not a very big group. So I would say we probably need to open that up a bit. There's a bit in here that's kind of repetitive. There's sections that talk about how you remove a member, for instance, and that's very good. It puts it in your purview, the city council. I know this has come up at the airport occasionally. There are people that work during the day, and our commission meetings historically have been at noon. So we could continue that. I think we also might think about maybe alternating and having some in the evening and some during the day, because I know there are people that are unable to come because of the noon meetings. We do need some clarity. This is page 3. It says we're going to elect a chairperson, a vice chairperson, and a recorder. Sounds like Scott has firmly signed up for the recording, so we probably don't need to elect you. And that's on page 3. So, and I think Scott has signed up to be the facilitator too. So I don't know if we end up with 2 people running the meeting, but perhaps maybe the facilitator focuses on maybe coaching the chair so the chair can better run the meeting. And I think that's the comments that I have. So I do appreciate you guys thinking about this and the discussion that you're having. I think it shows us all that you care and you're engaged, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Stan. Anyone else? Okay. Yes, if you want to come forward, and then Gene will get you right after. So if you could state your name and address for the record, and then take a few minutes.
Thank you. I'm Gina Bosco at 4003 Preston Avenue in Caldwell. I like to keep things really simple. We already have the code. We already have the guidelines for how to have a commission. The commission has never been given a chance to really work. Well, I can't say never. In my lifetime in the Caldwell Airport, I have not seen it be able to work the way it's supposed to work. So how do we know it's not working if we haven't really tried it? I would much rather spend the energy on making it work as it should, rather than put a lot of energy into coming up with a whole new group. And this is nothing against Scott. I have a lot of respect for Scott, and it's been, good to work with him and talk to him. But I don't know why we're burning all this time on something that's already set up. And the other thing too that would have been nice to know is that there was an opportunity to testify about this today, because I don't think any of us, we didn't know that coming here today. I think there are other people that probably would have wanted to also add to this as well. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I really feel like we need to give the body that's already designated in the city code a chance to work. And also the frequency of the meetings. That was the other thing too that concerned me, was the frequency of the meetings being so spread out that I really don't think, even no matter how it's set up, I don't think there can be much getting done. Even if there's, I know that Scott said that there would be a potential for additional meetings. I think, that would hopefully help if it did wind up being just a body not identified in the city code as it is now. But I do think that it needs to be a working group if it's a working group. And the other thing that I didn't feel super comfortable about at all was the fact that it's this board speaking to airport management, who then brings it to the city. Whereas previously it was a more direct line, that it was a body that was recognized by the city. And I feel, we lose that if we were to go to this format where there's somebody in between, the airport users or the commission and you guys. So that's all I have.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Jean, did you have a few words you wanted to say?
Hey, Jean Craig-Bring, and I strongly agree with what Diana and Chuck have said, that this is backwards if we're going to get rid of the citizens, because as I stated previously, your website says that citizen involvement is an essential ingredient for strong local government. But if you're going to tell them, see ya, and why would they want to come back and offer to give more time and effort? I think the city did a great thing hiring Scott. Several of us met with him. He's a great listener. I think he really wants to move forward in a positive way. But to wipe out what you already have in place and start fresh is not the way to do it. I think Scott needs to be guided by the people that have been willing to be involved and, go from there, go forward instead of backwards. And I also think it's backwards that truly, if you want somewhat of a reset, then get some guidelines, some bylaws, some procedures in place. After talking to him, I think the only thing we have in place is this new draft, but there's no plan of action moving forward. And I kept trying to ask that, what's the timeline? What is going to be the application process? And it seems the information he has at the airport is different than what's on the website. So there's some missing components here. So I think you do a disservice to wipe out the airport commission. And I think it would be a great service to embrace those that have helped and worked and put in time to make the airport even better. And so that's my thought on this. And I think, too, to support what some of the others have said, I think there still needs to be some more fine-tuning to that draft. I don't think it's correct completely, but that's my opinion.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So we've had the opportunity to hear from Mr. Swanson and from our airport users that are here. So, yes, Mr. Marshall, if you want to just take a couple minutes real quick.
Hi, Chris Marshall again. I'm almost a really happy bunny tonight. I've heard some really good stuff from the council members. I'm really pleased about this guy. I think he's a breath of fresh air. We met a year or so ago, Mr. Mayor. One of the things I said to you was the biggest problem at the airport is communication. Good communication will fix 80% of the problems that we had at the airport. In the 7 weeks that this guy has been around, Scott has done more on communication than we've seen in 18 months, 12 months, 2 years or more. Absolutely fantastic. I'm really delighted about that. On the other hand, the commission isn't functioning particularly well, but the commission will never function well unless you get a good leader. I think we've got a really good leader now. So let's give that commission a chance. We've got 5 people. Yeah, that's fine. Let's add them more if you want. I've applied to be on the commission twice now and been turned down, but hey ho, maybe it's my accent or something like that. But nonetheless, I think the commission is really important. I think it needs direction. It needs openness. It needs to feel like it's valued and loved. It's not felt valued and loved for a long time. And if you wrap your arms around it, which I think this guy most certainly can, we can have a really effective commission. Keep the people that are on there because they bring some continuity and some skills and some knowledge, bring some new people onto the commission. And I think those people will help make his job a whole lot easier because they're helping him make the decisions. So he's not the bad guy when he has to put lease rates up. He's not the bad guy when he has to bring bad news because he's actually brought it to the commission and the commission have decided and worked the best solution that is available for the city and for the airport. So I would really urge that yes, we can call it a commission, we can call it a board, whatever. It should meet monthly. It should retain the existing people, and if they want to stay on the commission, but also bring some other people in. And I think you get the best of all worlds by doing that. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, and I love your accent, by the way. So, okay, very good. So we appreciate all the feedback on that. So kind of the direction that I am seeing is that there's not, and I believe the council, at least the one, I know at least 3, it seems, that have proposed that agree with keeping with the board, the commission as we have it now. And again, this is the council's prerogative, how they want to move forward. But, and I know there's been talk about some fine tweaks that maybe could happen with the ordinance. My recommendation would be to still move forward with the ordinance in that discussion, because you can still make those fine tweaks. I know with the planning and zoning ordinance, we'd bring it back every year to look at it. Not saying we'd have to wait a year, but you could come back in a month with some of those tweaks. But I think it'd be good to at least have a starting point to know where we're at, that we can start moving forward in that direction, and then still coming back and tweaking that, whether it's the number of meetings, the youth member that was mentioned also. So I think you can make those adjustments, improvements, even if this is approved tonight. So I don't think you have to hold it off to get those. This could be a good point to start, and then still working on it, making those tweaks to make it even better. But again, it's the council's purview, but that would be a potential recommendation on that. So any discussion, questions, or anything from the council? Councilor Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just addressing the meeting point, because I think it's important to reiterate as well. There's a provision to add meetings that is a fairly easy provision to meet. So to have the quarterly scheduled, and if they were efficient, even our airport commission might find that we would need less than 9 meetings a year, which is all we're meeting now, I believe. It's not monthly, but I'm content with that staying in there. One suggestion was made tonight that I kind of like personally, and you'll have to look at this, Scott, in time, but changing the meeting time. One of the reasons that I think the hour at noon was so needed was so many people on that board work. Even the people that work for themselves have responsibilities. And so unless you want 9 retired people to sit in those meetings, having a different meeting time, perhaps in the evening, might be something to be considered. But I appreciate that as well. And Mr. Mayor, if I could just keep going for a minute, I'll make a motion and anybody can second it or amend it if they like. But I would move to sponsor bill number 46, ordinance number 3540. Sorry, I just touched my screen, and you know what happens when you do that. And ask that the removal of the airport commission be stricken from this action item, so that the ordinance would be approved in this bill, but that we leave the airport commission intact as is.
As part of the advisory board, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that is a motion for approval, or sorry, this is for sponsorship approval of bill number 46, ordinance number 3540, which is in regard to repealing and amending the City Code Chapter 2, Article 27, pertaining to the Caldwell Executive Airport Advisory Board, but does not do anything in relation to the termination of the current airport board commission members. They would basically continue in their terms as was originally approved. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor McGee in regards to that bill. North discussion. Did you have?
I do. I just had a couple of things to say to the people here from the airport. So I agree with what Councilor Williams was saying about, or I'm sorry, with what the mayor was saying about looking at some of these things later, the age part of it, and maybe reconsidering the bottom age. I agree about the frequency of the meetings, so I guess you're just going to have to figure that out. But I do want to say one thing, Vivian, when you were talking and you had said something about how this council had kind of failed or whatever it was, and I want to point something out because that kind of struck me a little bit. But this council, all these people, including Councilor Doty, we listened to you about the name change and we put it back the way it was. We listened to you about the lease agreements and we took care of that. We sent back until you guys came up with something that everybody agreed on. It was not something that the city just said you're going to do. We listened to the management concerns all the way up until today. We didn't raise your leases today because we were listening to you, all the way to not dismantling the board. So when you say that the council failed you, I don't think this council has failed at all. I think we've listened. I think we've heard you, and I hope that you guys see that, especially today with the support of keeping the advisory or board together, because we do value you. And I hope that it moves forward positively from here, and that you guys are willing to work with our Director of Aviation as much as he's been willing to work with you. And in saying that, I do think there's a respect for his position. So some of these things in his revisions that we may, you guys may not agree with or whatever, I think we need to respect his position and move forward with his plan and keep the board in place, like we've said, out of respect for you. So I think it's a really nice compromise, but I just want you to know that you've heard, and I don't think we failed you at all.
Any other discussion? Okay, very good. So we do have that motion and that second. So with that, we'll have the voting is now open. And all votes cast, the voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously. So those amendments, changes are adopted, and the Airport Board of Commission members, now the Airport Advisory Board, are there. So you can, I think the only two not here is Mr. Elroy and Mr. Khan, so you can reach out and let them know they're stuck. So they're still on it, whether they like it or not. So, okay. Thank you so much again for your input. It's very much appreciated and for being here for that. Okay, that moves us into action item number 5, consider resolution authorizing the use of ARPA funding to purchase flock license plate reader cameras in the amount of $378,450 as requested by the Caldwell Police Department. Chief.
Mayor, Council, thank you. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you, and I want to acknowledge Kristen McLeod and my Deputy Chief who have worked so hard on this project. So I'm super excited today because this is one of the major advancements that we're going to be asking for, to leverage technology to help us keep this city safe. We're not the first one to beat this trend in the state of Idaho. Our sister city to our east already has the system in place. It's a different company, but it's essentially the same thing. My Deputy Chief will get into the details, but I'm going to explain the why we need this. So as you guys know, Caldwell has some of the most violent gang crime in the entire state of Idaho. And just since I've taken over, in just over a year, we've had numerous shootings on the same street. We've had numerous aggravated assaults. We've had a lot of violent crime that we could have easily prevented before it happened, or responded in a swift manner after it happened and been able to identify the suspects involved by using cameras. And as a member of the police department, I take nothing more serious than the constitutional rights of our constituents here in Caldwell, our residents, everyone that works here, that lives here, that plays here. So what I want to just reiterate before my Deputy Chief comes up here is that this technology, if approved, is not going to be used to spy on our people, to look up license plates. We don't have some room in the police station where we have a bunch of cameras up, just watching cars drive through the city. This has been used to help, most recently, our detectives solve a Nampa child enticement case by simply logging into the system, typing in a quick vehicle description, and matching a picture of the suspect's car to the time and the location of where a little girl was almost kidnapped by 2 adult males. If you guys haven't heard the news from New York, upstate New York, of the little girl getting kidnapped over the weekend, they use similar technology to actually geofence and track the suspect who went into a campground, kidnapped a little girl off her bicycle, and took her to his house, who's a known sex offender. We can use criminal rap sheets and all kinds of technology to put 2 and 2 together to solve crimes. Just on Freeport down the street, we had 7 shootings in 6 months. With this type of technology, we can get cameras on each side and get every car coming in and out the night of the shooting or the day of the shooting to the minute. And it'll help us narrow the scope and fish with a hook instead of a net out there, and just be more strategic and precise about it. So I just want to say thank you in advance of the deputy chief, and those are all my remarks for right now.
Thank you. DC, Sopalaga.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you. Thank you, Chief. I think my favorite part about the chief when he says, hey, I'm going to give the introduction, he pretty much just spills everything I was going to say. So it's kind of out there, but thank you, Chief. LPRs, license plate readers. So this has actually been in the works at Caldwell before I even got here. When I got here, the detectives were running at me nonstop saying, hey, we need license plate reader cameras. We need license plate reader cameras. Nampa PD has it. They're solving all this violent crime. So at the time, the answer was no, because we were looking at one, funding, and two, really finding a company that satisfied our needs. So we finally got to that point. We've been researching different companies. We've been looking at funding it for it, and it all came to this point where we're actually ready to give a presentation. So thank you for being here and listening. So what is a license plate reader camera? It's really in the name. It reads license plates. So you can post the camera on power poles, street light poles, and basically they cover 2 lanes of traffic. And what they do is they run thousands of license plates back and forth. And so it's not a live camera. It takes snapshots, pictures of license plates. And so what they do with that is they put it into the cloud, and then we have access to that. So what we do is we can run many different queries. And so, like the chief said, say there's a shooting. If it's in a specific location at a specific time, whatever cameras we have in that area, we can go and look for them and read them. And then see what traffic is going and kind of narrow it down that way. A lot of time we get minimal information about vehicle description, like it was a white sedan. Well, we have the capability to query that and kind of narrow the scope, which is what we're really trying to get to, because we're really, with technology, what we're really trying to do is do more with less. We're trying to get our personnel staffing up. Our crimes don't stop. They keep coming in. Our detectives are super busy. So having to go out and actually do it the old school way. I know Chief Allgood knows that. He's been here before there was that type of technology. But for us, if we can be efficient and just run the plate, get the description, narrow it down, and start the investigation that way, that's really the direction we're trying to go and be more efficient. So one of the really cool things about the license plate reader is it has alerts. So if you run something into the National Crime Information Center, say a stolen vehicle plate, if there's a stolen vehicle that's entered into the system, if it hits on the camera, all the cops working will get an alert. They'll say, hey, there's a stolen vehicle that drove by this direction. Furthermore, you can enter your own information in there for wanted suspects and their vehicles, and you can get alerts that way. With us, like the chief said, we're dealing with a specific area where there's a lot of shootings going on. One of the things that's part of this proposal is called shot detection. And so what it does in our proposal, we ask for a half a mile of shot detection. And so when it hears gunshots, it automatically sends an alert out. So send an alert out to officers' phones, letting them know that, hey, there were shots fired. This is the area where it's coming from. These are the cameras we have in place. So we can right then and there start allocating our resources to areas to figure out what car it was and where it's traveling. So like I said, a lot of it's efficiency. I don't know if you guys remember, there was that incident where it was a road rage incident, and a kid got out of the car and actually started shooting into another vehicle. I think we got lucky on that case because we actually had the suspect confess to a friend the next day who called us. But if we didn't have that information, we would really have a tough chance trying to capture that person. But if we had the LPRs up, we'd be in a really good position. So the benefits, I kind of went over it as far as the investigation portion, so I'll kind of skip this, and efficiency. So the big concern is a concern that's worthy of being a concern. It's basically invasion of privacy, but also misuse of that data. So what do you do to control that? You do what you always do. You set serious and rigorous data protection measures, and you decide via policy
who can access that and how much access they have to the system. So for us, I mean, we've kind of dialed in a policy which kind of leaves it to serious crimes, right? We really want to stick to felonies. I don't want to look in the license plate camera for somebody who ran a red light. That's not our intention. Our intention is to reduce violent crime and to become more efficient with how we do investigations. So the cost is obviously another issue. I think, and this is just from hearing it from other people who have license plate cameras, is that you can't really measure the cost savings you have from the crimes that you are going to be able to solve, because it really goes to quality of life, safety for communities. And it's such a big impact that this is something that's happening all across the nation. So I'm not saying we're behind, but most people are doing these in their cities now. So the local perspective. So if we look locally here, the Nampa Police Department has been doing it for a while. They have about 50 cameras up in their city. Meridian just hopped on this year. They have a lot of cameras. I know ISP has access to cameras, and if you've been following the news recently, the Ada County Sheriff's Office has made a proposal for license plate readers. So the company that we've kind of been that we selected they're called Flock Safety. They're one of the top LPR companies in the nation. They work with over 700 plus agencies across the nation, and we've kind of really done extensive research with them and several other companies, but they were the one we landed on. One of their really main points was their community policing model. So what they do is they don't only offer LPRs to police officers or police agencies. That's their main customer, but they also offer it to businesses and citizens. So there are a lot of HOAs who invest in flock cameras. There are a lot of major corporations that invest in the flock system. And what that does is whoever gets a flock system or purchases a flock system, we can also have access to that. So I think from a community policing standard, this could be really big for us if other businesses are willing to invest in this as well. They're also subscription-based. So it's year to year. If this is something that we decide it's not working for us or it's too cost, we can't handle the cost, we can always get rid of it. We don't own the cameras. Some LPR companies we looked into, you actually have to buy the camera and you own the camera. It doesn't work that way with them. So our funding proposal is to reallocate ARPA funding in $378,450 for a 3-year contract. And this would cover 33 cameras throughout our city, and it would cover a half mile of shot detection. So we've kind of been working with the company. We actually had our police officers who are very knowledgeable about the violent crimes occurring in our city meet with their strategists and take a look at a map and decide, hey, this is where cameras should probably go. This is where shot detection should probably go. So we've done that homework, and we think we are in the best situation. We just need to get it funded. In conclusion, we really want to stay close to our mission. We want to reduce crime, we want to increase quality of life, and we want to create a safer community. We truly, truly believe that this is going to help us do that. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you so much. Questions, Councilor McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Deputy Chief. You said one thing that piqued my interest. I'm going to support this. I think this is a good idea. But you said one thing that kind of piqued my interest. You said HOAs can have this system. Is there some state law that governs who can and can't have flock systems?
Not that I know of. So I think the representative, Kristen, can answer that question.
Thank you.
I might be toast here. Good evening, council members and mayor. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So we do provide commercial customers with the software and capabilities. It's a bit different and than what law enforcement has. So an HOA, for example, could purchase our cameras and have access to the software, and they'll be able to, if there is a suspicious vehicle in their neighborhood, they're able to utilize a filter, for example, with a list of residents that live in that neighborhood to kind of filter out if that vehicle belongs to someone in the neighborhood. And then they're able to share that information with local law enforcement, and then local law enforcement will be able to kind of pick up that investigation at that point and then pursue. The data is 100% owned by our customers. Flock Safety does not own any of your data. We act as the guardian of it once the still image of the vehicle is uploaded into the AWS cloud and it's encrypted end to end, so very protected. The customer has control over who they share that information with. So again, that data is 100% owned by the city, by the department.
I think also it's basically taking pictures of the license plate. It's not inside the car, the person driving it really, it's mostly the license plate. Maybe you do get some of that, but that's the focus, is the license plate on that. Is that correct?
Correct. It is the rear of a vehicle. We are able to capture the make, model, special features such as tinting or a roof rack, for example, and then the license plate, if it's a paper plate, the state that that plate is, and it's a still image of the rear of the vehicle. There is no facial recognition. There is no ability to search by a person.
Do you have a follow-up? Or?
Well, yeah, I do. Again, I think this is a great tool in the hands of law enforcement. I get the chills knowing that my HOA president knows when my car goes through the subdivision. I have a little bit of an issue with that. It's not going to affect how I vote on this, because I think this is a great tool to put in the hands of our police. And if I knew a state legislator, I might talk to him about what we can do to make sure that those flock systems stay in the right hands of people. But I find that a little bit unusual that HOAs would have that ability to do that. Can you help me feel better about that?
So there's also within the software system, there is a search reason that is required. So it provides safeguards as far as somebody just kind of entering, like, I want to target a neighbor and watch movements. That's not what the system intention or capable of doing. There's also a transparency portal, which is unique to Flock Safety. So the transparency portal can be public, and it's also optional for your department, where it shows the policies of the ALPR technology. It shows how many hits that, alerts that have been generated by the cameras for wanted or of interest vehicles. And so again, providing the public and community members that information so that with commercial, neighborhood, and HOAs can feel better about what that technology is being used for.
I have something to make you feel better, I think. How much do they cost? I'm totally off the subject, but if they're very expensive for HOAs, you probably know if it was there, I would guess. Or is there not a fee?
So generally, it's $3,000 per camera per year.
Never mind, maybe they're watching you, I don't know.
I know I've
It's a
got
little
security
creepy,
cameras all
yeah.
around my house, so I know I'm watching the people around my house.
Right, right. So just a couple of questions. So we know the fee for actually purchasing the cameras. So what is the maintenance or fee or the subscription fee?
That is what, $3,000 per camera per year for the ALPR technology, and then I don't have the contract in front of me as far as the gunshot audio detection.
Well, I'm just looking at what we're paying. So if we're paying $378,000 a year.
Yeah, so it's a 3-year contract, so
Oh,
that's
3
split
years.
over 3 years.
Okay, so $378,000 for 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And then my other question was, can you move the cameras? Like if you have a
Yeah, if a camera is ineffective where it is and you decide you want to move it, they'll come out and move it for you. It's a $300 cost.
Okay, but they can't be moved if you find a high target area or you have more.
You can move it
incidences
wherever
there.
you want.
Okay, and then I was listening a little bit to the transparency. We don't plan on disclosing where the cameras are though, right? For the criminals to then drive around?
No, but I think they're going to be visible, so they'll see them, which is also beneficial because it is a deterrent.
Right. I just don't want, if you have a high incident of violent crimes on whatever street, and we put them on each end, I just don't want them to go, well, we'll just go this way and avoid them, you know.
And the good thing about Flock is we actually work with a strategist who answers those questions. So we basically focus on choke points.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you're coming in this way, we're going to get you here. If you try to leave this way, we're going to have a camera here, here, here.
Okay.
So it really saturates specific areas, especially areas where you're dealing with high crime. We have a few in the city that we've already identified, and we're definitely trying to lock down that area.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Register, and just to answer your question too, so the gang crime that's committed in Caldwell, majority of it is target specific at people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
Until as they move, the drive-bys are going to continue happening at those same residences. So if we can choke them off on either side and put them at the major intersections, it's just going to make it safer. And one thing that the deputy chief didn't mention that I want to mention is that with Lexipol, which is our policy and procedure manual that we're implementing, this is going to fall right in line with that. So everything is going to be regulated, audited frequently by myself. But I can tell you that personally, seeing our detectives literally solve crime within 2 minutes of something happening is a total game changer for this. I would hate to see another Michael Vaughn happen, which happened in Fruitland, still unsolved, right? Had they had LPR cameras or this technology, those suspects would be in custody. And we see it across the country every day. This is not government overreach. This is not Big Brother extending its arm to try to spy on people. This is about the safety and the best interest of this community with the tax-paying dollars, the federal money that we have to spend the most fiscally responsible on this best technology.
Councilor Williams, you had a question for Chief, I think?
I do. Thank you, Chief. You're already answering my question, but I want to hear you say it again because it's important. I mean, the reality is, before I ask my question, the reality is there's cameras all around us that are capturing us and taking our pictures all the time anyway.
That's correct.
In the day and age we live in, whether you have them or not. My concern is the right to privacy. And so reassure us again how, and you just answered part of it with Lexipol, and who will have access to this, and those guidelines will give you the way to audit those, and this won't be used for anything other than what you're telling us,
correct,
which is solving felonious cases in the city of Caldwell. Just reassure me of the right to privacy before I vote for this.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. So everything that I've tried to do since taking over has been reorganizing the systems, controls, and oversight with accountability for this department. And one of the things that I've done is implemented the Lexipol Policy and Procedure Manual, which allows us as the managers or the executives to really get into detail about what our officers and our personnel can and cannot do. Also, I audit everything. I see every day-to-day thing that our officers and our staff are doing 24 hours a day comes to me. Every use of force, every vehicle pursuit, every arrest comes directly to my phone, directly to my email. So just that accountability piece, plus having policies that council can audit or anyone can audit that are going to be made available online to be fully transparent, but also having the right people, the right users that have the access to the system. We're not giving every police officer the access to the system. These are people that are trained, that have actually gone through some sort of training program, that also have the user rights to do this. We understand in Idaho that it's a very constitutional state, and that's why I moved my family here to this state from California. So I want to reiterate to the community and to council and mayor, this is not us as the police department trying to inadvertently spy on Councilmember McGee's house, right? This is for us to get people, because I would be remiss if Councilman McGee said my daughter was just enticed on her way home from school, and we don't have the technology to solve that immediately, like they do in Nampa, like we did for them with their technology a couple months ago. So with that being said, as far as my leadership style, my oversight, the systems and controls that we put in place here in the organization with Lexipol and all the different auditing mechanisms that we can do, we can have people sign in, I could audit the log. As it stands right now, what my vision is to have our detectives be able to use it, supervisors, patrol team supervisors. So if something happens, someone on the team, a supervisor, can log in and look at the system and see who is driving around at that time. To be honest with you, there's too many cars on the road for us to have time to even look at half the cars for one night.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes,
Mayor,
start it.
I just wanted to compliment Chief Ingram. I had a concerned citizen who's a retired Navy submarine person and a retired sheriff's deputy too. He was concerned about the same thing that Counselor Williams was, and your email was just perfect because he sent an email back completely satisfied and all for it. So appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. The last thing I want is people to be worried. And Council McGee, I don't want you to, I mean, the reality is everyone has a Ring camera. So we already use the private technology to solve things, but sometimes they're not captured on Ring. So this just is another force multiplier.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Algood.
First of all, can we have the lady identify herself? We didn't get who she was exactly.
My apologies, Kristen McLeod. I'm a community engagement manager with Flock Safety.
Thank you so much. And then a couple questions for Chief Sipple over there. So I know I'm old, but these were around before I left. At that time, some of them were being used vehicle mounted. You cruise up and down streets, you cruise parking lots for wanted vehicles. Is that part of this portion? Are we not doing that, or what are we looking at there?
So it's not part of this portion yet because that takes more funding. But one of the reasons we went with Flock Safety as well is they are actually associated with Axon. So we just signed the Axon contract. We have the Axon body cameras here in the station. We're going to start rolling those out soon. But their Axon's in-car camera, they have a LPR version that is strictly associated with Flock Safety. So yes, we have thought about that in the future. We just don't have the money for that right now.
Gotcha. And then one more question is, because we'll be processing the number of license plates that this has capability, will it change our ILETS cost? Will it affect ILETS in any way? We pay by user, or how much we use. Is there any change in fees, do you know?
Not that I know of, no. Yeah, because to my knowledge, we're not processing them. They're just going in the cloud. The only time we would process them is if we needed to access it for an investigation, which wouldn't be the thousands of them.
Gotcha. All right, that's all.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, so that puts this resolution before council for any discussion or any motions.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Register.
I move that we accept the resolution authorizing, oops, am I in the right one? Oh, yeah. Use of the ARPA funds to purchase the Flock license plate reader cameras in the amount of $378,450 as requested by the Caldwell Police Department.
Motion from Councilor Register, second from Councilor McGee for approval of the resolution. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Elgid.
Just one quick question. The Deputy Chief said we reallocated this money. What did we take it away from?
So I asked the same question. It appears when I talked to the finance director, Raylyn, I don't think she's here today, but what she said is it was reallocated from the Axon purchase. So with Axon, we only used about, I think, $900 or so $1,000, but the money that was allocated for it was actually almost 1.4 million. So that's the money that we're using to reallocate for it.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or discussion on the motion? Okay, then the voting is open at this time. All votes are in, so voting is closed, and that motion passes unanimously, and that has been approved. That moves us into action item number 6, resolution authorizing the use of ARPA funding to purchase police radios in the amount of $205,390.40. DC Sopowaga.
I'm back.
You're back.
Mr. Mayor, council members. So within the next 18 to 24 months, I don't think it's a secret, everyone who is actually under the scope of the Canyon County Sheriff's Office and uses their radio system knows that they're looking to upgrade specifically our repeater that we use.
what they're going to do is they're going to update it for encryption. And so when they do that, the radios that we have right now are going to be obsolete and we won't be able to use them. So we are requesting this so we can get updated and obviously be in compliance and be able to have radios that work. So this works for in-car radios, which is the majority of this. And then also we have some older portable radios that if they're not above the 6,000, it's not going to work with the new system. So we still have a few of those out there. So this is what this proposal is for.
Okay. Any questions for DC Silpwaga? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, so with that, then this would stand before the council for either a motion or discussion or questions. Further moved. Is that for approval of the resolution?
Approval of the resolution.
Councilor Williams, and a second from Councilor Register to approve resolution authorizing the use of the ARPA funds for the police radios as mentioned. With that, if there's any discussion, voting is open. And all votes are cast, the voting is closed, and that passes unanimously. That moves us to action item number 7. Consider resolution authorizing the execution of a cooperative agreement with Valley Regional Transit for public transportation financial contribution in the amount of $645,142. Mr. McDonald, do you mind presenting on this? Or were you going to do it, Rochelle? I think Rob's dying to get up and move around and wake up a little bit. I need to get up and move. I got to get some steps in. I'm way behind.
Back open my.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to confess I have not been involved with VRT almost at all. Up until very recently when they sent me a contract for a renewal for 2 new routes, as I understand it, that they're proposing through Caldwell. And then in a meeting that we had with them and also other members of Compass of Idaho and ITD, VRT did mention too that they have plans to expand in Caldwell with additional bus stations and things like that they're going to start looking at. This funding was budgeted for and anticipated by my predecessor. I was not in any of those discussions, and so I'm not exactly sure if this was typical. I believe this is more than what we've paid in the past simply because they're adding routes to the city. Whereas before all it was on-call service, now they're actually adding bus routes where they feel like the demand is here and the use is going to be higher than it's been in the past. So with that said, I've checked with finance. This has been budgeted for, and I stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. And I know that I looked up these numbers with Rochelle earlier today. I don't remember the exact, let's see how good my memory is. I think it was last year I know it was over 200,000. I think it was like 245,000 in that range of what typically has been on that. So kind of how it works, so VRT has requests to each city allotted by the number of people in your city times by whatever multiplier they have, and that's the request to each city to provide funding for VRT to come and provide services in your community. Some cities accept that, some cities provide less than what's been requested for VRT, and then obviously VRT, if it's a less amount, would adjust their service in that community and lessen it on that. So with this, as was mentioned by Mr. McDonald, Mr. Orton had worked through this with VRT. I was part of some of those discussions. So the request was adding 2, and I think they used to be here and then went away, but 2 dedicated full service routes that would traverse through Caldwell throughout the entire day, providing pickup and drop off locations, from that would connect downtown Caldwell, West Valley Medical Center. There's some affordable housing project out there is recently completed to provide transportation for them, again, up to the boulevard to Nampa and then back. So this would provide a dedicated service running those buses throughout the day on a half-hour to hour timeline at those stops, rather than, as mentioned, currently it's more of an on-demand service on that. There are some changes being proposed that Councilor Stoddard and I were at VRT yesterday. These approvals, I know the Route 43 that I used to ride when I worked at ACHD was a commuter ride from Caldwell, direct route to downtown Boise. That has been eliminated. Unfortunately, I enjoyed that, but the ridership had dropped. So they do look at that, but this is to provide just it would not be from Caldwell to Boise, more of a Caldwell to Nampa, those two routes. And so the increased funding was to provide for those. It was budgeted, was approved as part of the budget. This is the resolution to authorize that, to move forward with that agreement with VRT on that. So that, I know there's some discussion items on that. So Councilor Stoddard, turn it over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the council aware of this meeting that the mayor and I were in yesterday, I guess it was, the day before. Anyway, there's a problem with some of the new routes that they're going to service the BSU attendees to the football games and some other things. And federal law prohibits any organizations like theirs to service somebody if it's already serviced. And the big bugaboo about this particular one is that the supposedly law says if it's not a charter service, that they can go ahead and service that and take the business away from somebody else. The Caldwell Transportation company over here off of 10th, they've been servicing that route that VRT wants to take over now with the BSU deal, and they're going to be out of pocket about $31,000 that was in their budget. And right now we're just going back and forth with the legal folks, and I don't know, Mark, if you're going to get involved with this or not, but the big hesitation on this is the word charter, whether it was charter service or not, and how you interpret that. But again, the way I looked at it, they're taking a new service. They were supposed to talk to people that presently service that route before they said they would do it, but they never did that either. So obviously the folks over here at CTC are pretty set up that, and like I say, it's $31,000 that's out of their pocket. So we're supposed to have another meeting, I believe, in January to discuss that from a legal standpoint, but I don't know if you want to look in that or not, but anyway, it's something we need to consider, because again, if that is against federal law, then I would, I sure would want to fund this organization and at least take some money away from them because of that, because we can't use taxpayer funds for that type of stuff. So anyway, thank you, Murray.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. So my understanding, it was that there's a loophole in it, 'cause I know that VRT had reached out, Caldwell Transportation, also the general manager, Mr. Stevenson, I believe, is that sound correct, had come and met with me, and I believe spoke with Councilor Stoddard as well. So he had reached out to the federal administration as well that oversees that. And so the loophole is that it's not charter if it's free. And so that's where you can get away, because they're not allowed to provide charter services as a federal transportation authority. But if you offer the service for free, which means you don't get any money in return or promises or whatever it is, then you can do those services. And so that's how they were able to do it. Now, the word free there is obviously a little loose, because they're not receiving money, but obviously they're spending money. They're having to use the vehicles, they're having to hire drivers on that. So we had, there was some discussion yesterday. It will be coming back in January to the board to put parameters in when and how VRT can do these, whether it's no, you can't do it at all. If there's a private service that can do it. There's examples for that where maybe it does work, and one of those is the air show that recently took place, Gowan Thunder. There simply was not capacity for all of the private charters to provide adequate enough service, and so VRT was able to step in and also provide that, just because there was not enough buses with the private charter companies, so they had to come in and help, because that one-day event I think had like 150,000 people there, so obviously you need that number in. But as Councilor Stoddard mentioned, the one that has been taking place is for the Boise State games. That's been going on this year already, where Caldwell Transportation did have the contract before, however, did not get it this year because VRT stepped in. According to them, they did not solicit it. They did not go out, but they did come to them asking, and so they worked out that arrangement where they would provide it for free. It does provide some benefits. I mean, their buses are obviously set up better for moving people, because they have the front entrance and the back entrance. They're lower to the ground, easier for disabled people to get in and out. So there are those benefits, but again, you're taking away, by providing that free, you're taking away any opportunity for a private business to come in because they obviously can't do it for free because they have those costs and expenditures. They don't have property tax dollars to offset it like VRT does. And so that's where the concern really comes in. And you gotta, maybe it sounds great and looks great on paper, but once you implement it, it maybe not as good as you thought it was going to be. So I know there was a little bit of heartburn felt from some of the staff. They're like, yeah, we probably should have looked at this a little better, a little deeper. And so they are going to dive into that and see, do they do it at all? And if they do, is it just for, it must qualify by these types of events, and that'll be decided by the board at VRT as when and how, if they could do those at all. So the board only meets quarterly, so that will be going back in January. And so I guess the question is, and I agree that it was probably a bad choice. It was a bad choice for VRT to do that, taking away that private business. But I also recognize the great service they provide. I've had many people that would be on these routes express their excitement to have the opportunity to have buses come to them. I know, I can't remember the name, Sunset Village or Sunset Ridge, the new apartment right at Logan and Kimball, kind of kitty corner from the gas station there. And it's an affordable housing project, and they had a ribbon cutting there a few months back that I was able to attend, and many of the people came up and said they're excited. They'd heard about this bus route, and they're going to be able to take the bus and get to, downtown Caldwell or get to Walmart or wherever it may be. So it does provide what I feel is a needed, necessary service for that population, which is just either they can't drive, can't afford to drive, or they're elderly or whatever it may be, that gives them that opportunity. So there is benefit in it. I, again, recognize that VRT did make a mistake on that, hopefully trying to fix that, wrong that right, or right that wrong, I guess is a better way to put that. So anyways, that's kind of where that's at is, and respect Counselor Stoddard and his comments 100% and agree with that it just was not a good move on that part. So, the question is, how do we move forward on that? The council, what's your prerogative? I don't know the timeline. I know that I think it was October 1st was in this agreement on that, providing this, and obviously they want to get started sooner than later. If council feels that they want a little bit more time to gather some more information, to hear from VRT, see, what was their take on it, and how do they plan on, utilizing these funds moving forward, I would respect that and council's decision. But that's kind of, I guess, I'll quit talking, and if you have any specific questions, we can try to answer those.
Well, Mr. Mayor, and I was unaware of obviously, I think you guys just talked about this yesterday, you and Councilman Stoddard. But if by voting for this, voting in favor of this, which is an substantial increase from last year, I believe, and by voting for it, indirectly, we are taking away a route from one of our local businesses. I have a little bit of heartache doing that. I agree with you. I recognize what VRT does and the benefits that it provides to our community. But having said that, I'd sure like to find out more about how that issue is going to be addressed. It seems unfair to take that route away, regardless of the technicality. It seems unfair to take that route away from a Caldwell business who's helping to provide to give a paycheck to an employee driving a bus. And so I would be interested in discussing whether or not we put off this decision until we can get some more information about what's going on there.
Yeah, and this one in and of itself would not be taking these two routes coming in. They're not replacing one that's out there by being provided by a private business. There just is no route. So this one these two in and of itself don't. And I know in just talking with VRT that they said that the money that they used to provide those buses was part of City of Boise's allotment. As I mentioned, each city gives their allotment, and so they took that allotment from the City of Boise in discussion with them to pay for that. So it technically did not come, say, from our portion, but still it did come, obviously, from the taxpayers at some point, whether it was Caldwell or Boise's. And then it did affect, regardless of that, it did affect the Caldwell business, that's located in Caldwell, and took away business from them. So that's kind of, I guess, where that's at on that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think the biggest heartburn I have with it is we just don't have all the information. Even Mr. McDonald, as good as he is my time up?
No, it's my emergency room.
This is a lot of money. If you were coming at me for anything else and saying I want to spend $400,000 beyond what we spent last year, I'd want a little more information than what we have here. And I hesitate because I don't want to appear to be against any kind of transit that serves our community, especially those people that have a need for public transportation. Even though there are, like you pointed out already, anybody can pick up the phone right now and call and get public transportation provided to them, especially the elderly or the infirmed. And so there is an availability of this, but I'm just concerned that we're moving ahead without all the data, which is a problem to me. In the end, I may end up affirming this, but I hate to vote yes on something I don't have all the information on, and I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, oh, it does. Yes,
So
Councilor.
I would just second what Councilor Williams said. I mean, it's 645,000. I'd like to know what the ridership is. We could buy an Uber for everybody, depending on how much, you know what I mean? Depending on how many riders we have riding this bus. That's a big number, and I think we definitely need more information.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just, for the rest of the councilors, I would recommend that we just table it until we get this thing solved, maybe in January sometime, and then go ahead with it and see what we have, so. And then Mr. Hilty can probably look at it too and give us some good advice too on, you know, the terminology of the charter, and so, anyway, that's what I would recommend.
Did I hear a motion to table it? Is that what that was?
So I think it would be, so it sounds like, not tabling, but just not voting on it, like remove, like, we're not continuing it to a date certain, we're just would remove it from, okay, right there, so.
That's a motion.
Okay, so a motion to table this, with a second from Council Williams to allow staff more time to discuss this with VRT and provide some additional information to council to see when they'd like to have it back on the agenda. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, we can just do a voice vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. So that moves us to action item 7A. Mr. McDonald. Resolution to authorize expenditure of $49,090 for the completion of the parking lot adjacent to the Parks and Rec building.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am here on behalf of Julie McCoy, our Parks and Rec Director. She was not able to make it tonight. We have, after the new Parks and Rec building was constructed, and then the old building was demolished, we have a large dirt vacancy in front of the building. And the intent there was, initially there was discussion on whether the old building would remain, but I think it was clear that we wanted it removed. But at the time, we never planned further beyond than just getting the new building built and having that shop built for them. And so Ms. McCoy was asked the engineering department to help facilitate a design. And that is something that we were actually able to do in-house, which has been nice. And I will mention we have our assistant, we have our, man, it's getting late, associate engineer, Jacob back here, who helped me with the design, and we threw a design together fairly quick. We did not have to hire a consultant to do it. And then we put this out and got a quote from ASC Construction, who does a lot of our LID work, and they gave us a quote for $49,000 to come in and build an addition to the parking lot, which has 9 additional stalls and basically fills in that gap that's right there. It adds some curb gutter and sidewalk along the frontage. And then there will be some area that will be landscaped by the Parks Department after the fact. So it'll beautify that area and just turn it into usable space without just being a dirt lot. And with that, I stand for any questions.
It's getting late, it's not even 9. We don't hit our stride till about midnight.
It hasn't been that long, but it's felt that long.
Yeah, it feels like it. It feels about as long as that one we went till midnight. Any questions for Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Boddick.
Rob, would that include that little patch of driveway from Kimball, you know, the back way behind that ball field and into the yard there too, or not? I think it's gravel now or something. right behind the softball field.
No, this does not, Councilman Stoddard, this does not include that. That was a secondary access that we had to use during the construction of the building. And I think at some point, the Parks wants to continue to expand back all the way back to where it, let's see, I'm not thinking of the right spot. I was thinking back on the 5th. You're talking about, let me make sure I understand what you're talking
Go
about.
down Kimball, you go past the National Guard Armory, and you have the ball fields there. There's one ball field, and there was a road that was cut in.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that is the one that I'm thinking
Okay,
of.
okay.
Yeah, so that was a temporary access point. I don't know if they still use it or not, but ultimately, I think the Parks would want to expand and end up using a lot, maybe more of that space. But this is just right up in the front
Okay.
on Irvine Street where that dirt area is in front of the building.
Good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. McDonald? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Again, this is just a resolution, so if we have any discussion or motion on this, approval or denial of the resolution for the expenditure for this parking lot.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the resolution for the expenditure for the completion of the parking lot.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor Stoddard for approval of this resolution. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, on that, the voting is open. And all votes are cast, the voting is closed, and that passes unanimously. And that, believe it or not, brings us to our last action item, to consider the acceptance of the finance report.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Register.
I move that accounts payable in the amount of $2,203,939.72, represented by check numbers 172538 through 172794, and payroll for the amount of $583,854.33, represented by check numbers 38949 through 38974, and direct deposits be accepted, payments approved, and vouchers filed in the office of the city clerk.
Do we have a second? Second. So motion from Councilor Register, second from Councilor Williams for approval of the finance report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. So that moves us into council reports. Councilor Register.
No, I've done enough talking.
Very good. Councilor Stoddard.
I want to commend Mr. Doty for tolerating the meeting tonight, so.
We should just keep going to keep him here. So Councilor Williams.
No comment.
Councilor Allgood.
I just wanted to comment on how smoothly the meeting went without Councilor Doty.
And Councilor McGee.
Mayor, I'd just reiterate what Councilman Allgood talked about. I think we're going to be done here about 9. And I think the last time that Councilman Doty was here, we got done at midnight. And so I don't think that that's a coincidence. And Mayor, I will also say one thing. I did wear a special sweatshirt. I was hoping that you were going to notice. I don't know if you and I are going to have a friendly wager on the upcoming ball game.
Not on this one.
That would be, Mayor, I would recommend that you keep that position.
Right. I am a Caldwell alum, but my kids do go to Ridgeview, and they did beat Valley View last year.
True. I was unfortunately I was there, Mayor.
Which shocked me, to be honest. I did not see that coming. I hate to say it. So my son plays for the freshman team, and they're really good, but the varsity struggles.
I will compliment you, Mayor, in putting that game together. I know back when you and I were younger, and a lot of people in this community, that Caldwell Valley View game at Simplot was always a big community event, and I think bringing that back together, regardless of the level right now of what those teams might be, is a good thing for the community. So commend you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was just going to be the one comment I had, was just reminding people about Friday Night Lights back. We're so excited for that. That's this Friday, and it just worked out perfect with Caldwell versus Valley View. Hope to make that a annual tradition. So the day was set as I met with the College of Idaho. And it just, like I said, worked out perfect for the two. So we're hoping in the future we can just make sure that does happen between those two teams. But yeah, very excited. And kudos to, to Regan Rossi and to Austin Bastacheria, I think is his name. Did I get the last name right? Close enough. Her assistant, AD out there. Great to work with on this. We had a meeting recently with the two ADs from the two schools. Austin was there. Regan wasn't able to be there. And just, the city of Iowa is willing to bend over backwards to help and make this work for those two high schools. And so super excited. So hope all the council members can be there and invite friends and family and get the word out. We want a really big crowd, regardless of who's going to win. But yeah, I definitely won't be. Now, Caldwell did win their first football game, I believe, in 7 years last week. Now, we won't mention the team they played, which was Notice, which I think has as many kids or people in the town as Caldwell has attend their high school. But they did pull out a victory, and I told my wife, we're going to this game because I think they're going to win. So we were there. So we were able to be there. The students rushed the field. I mean, it was awesome. It was fun. So we're looking forward to this. Maybe they can get a win streak going. Who knows? So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's Friday night at 7 p.m. Simplot Stadium. So we're very excited for that. And that's all that I have. So with that, I stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And all those in favor?
Mr. Mayor.
We have executive session.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Take back that motion. Is that what you're gonna remind me? We do have an executive session that will be very quick. So do we have a motion for executive session, actually?
Mr. Mayor.